Sure.
I want to post this on social media.
I'm not your best social media guy. Pete probably is.
No, but I know how to do it. It's just that what link are you using? Like if I put at Granite Rock?
Granite Rock, yes.
Granite Rock?
So graniterock.com, the website, it will be at the top of the page.
Granite, I think what I'll do is I'll copy it from here. And what's the title? Let me just go to it and I can find it.
Yeah, it should be the top of the page.
Because the food is late, we're going to let a couple people make announcements that we're going to start in about 10 minutes or so.
That'll be fine.
So if you haven't had a chance to go up and get some more food, go.
I've got some, but I'm going to go for some more. Just no space. But yeah, Granite. There you go. It's found it.
Right there?
Yep.
That's you guys, right?
Yep.
You don't get it. I was going to get to the link where you... Oh, this is it. So I can...
Yeah, this is
right here. So I'm going to upload it. Yep, perfect.
Yep. And I'm just restarting it so we're ready for the beginning. There's not too much baggage on it.
Hello, folks. Just an FYI, we're going to get started with the program in about 10 minutes because the food was a little late. So we're going to have the program start in about 10 minutes. Remember that the food will be available till 2:30, so if you're still a little peckish during the program, feel free to go up and grab a bite. We're not going, no one will think poorly of you. We're going to have a couple of announcements briefly at the start by a couple of people, and then we're going to get to the program. So about 10 minutes or so. So just an FYI, so everyone will be ready.
Long time no.
You get emails from the 603 Alliance?
I don't.
Okay. 603 in here, sure.
Yeah.
They have James O'Keefe.
I heard he was coming.
Yes.
I wrote it on my calendar, and then I scratched it off.
Jeff Gill has an advance right on that day, too.
Oh, I wouldn't be going. It's just that I'm trying very hard to downsize the amount of work because I have to catch up with stuff. You know, my father passed away, so I'm still catching up with that. These affairs, and I spread myself so thin. So I did put it on the calendar because it's what, like the 13th or something.
No, it's the January 31st.
That's a Wednesday. So I'm going to leave it up in the air because I don't feel as anxious today as I did because I resigned from some of the projects I've been doing. So it's up in the air. I'll find
That's right.
to go up a training. Okay. Work on a property that got damaged during the hurricane. Thursday night, then I had the massive flood. I remembered all my kids. So, if I can, but how do I get on there?
603. I can forward you my email.
Are they on Facebook?
Also,
Yeah, I can see the email, and I will,
The only thing that, well, just an FYI, they want, they're closing out ticket sales on the street.
okay, then I have to,
Oh, yeah, just get the show.
yeah.
No, something like 35. And it doesn't include the bar. I mean, it's like the first night was 25. Not both, I don't know. I actually signed up and I got the email.
Yeah, no, somebody told me about it, I wrote it down, and I was like, what are you doing? But so like, we had, maybe starting in a month or two, we had a conference call. We had a half-hour conference call. And then let it evolve to,
I got one question. Is that guy 6'2" or 6'3"?
he's tilted right now. I didn't put a sign on. Okay, let me do this. What's the, I know, I'm trying to find the exact word.
I love that.
I couldn't get on the.
I just ripped mine off.
Do you have a new?
No, I had to go to a Catholic Men's Farm, so I'm in charge of my work.
Well, Bonnie does, she just did. So
My name is
Well, the second to last thing I posted. Well, it's in, so if you look at my news feed, President Trump here.
Who's working here?
No, because what I'm doing is I have a block live thing.
Oh, okay.
He's not gonna get it. They're gonna get it. They're all going down.
Instead, I want to see if I can get
You
people
know right
to
now that they're staffing.
tune in.
It's not just the United States. He's going after Saudi Arabia, which is having no not all of them. Now this thing
I'm on the panel.
What firm are you with?
I'm with a couple, just Axel America and Master.
Okay. Yeah, Act America. I'm familiar with the Murray and the Act America. They're the guys back who did that. They did it. But they were, it was like nobody else in the country was doing that. A mosque that we did too.
and the money, what happened in the past, where the money went.
There's probably an island named for it.
All these lives.
Yep.
You walk with some of that. Oh, I know, like the north.
Oh, okay. As long as you know, it looks like blood, I'm sorry. As long as you're healthy, that's fine.
Oh yeah, go ahead, do it. Go in there. You got a card? Trade cards. Yeah, I got. You know, I was supposed to have my running for governor cards today, but they delayed them for a week.
My guess is the Mass GOP.
I met with them yesterday. They promised to be neutral.
They're lying.
But I can play the game. What they gave me, I
I've
asked.
already stacked the deck.
I know. It is. They cheat. They cheat like liberals.
You're not even going to call. No, I wouldn't call. That's giving us some credit.
Well, it depends on your definition.
One that's in Africa.
I have a cartoon we put out. It's got a picture of like a monster right now. With his foot on the head of a baby elephant, right? And a sword, political correctness sticking into the side of the elephant. It says, of all the animals in the political
What town are you from?
Springfield is where our main base is, but I just got to confirm it.
Oh, well, you can say formerly.
Yeah, but even when they change the climate change, we got through that 10 minutes there.
Once again, I wanted to request being in on the front end, like the events rather than the back end, so that I can get out of here.
Make your announcement.
I'm not from there.
Okay, where's that?
And
No, he wanted more than that. He wanted to be there
because I really like my mom, and it's really cheeky. I've lived there for 5 years.
He's not on the Well, you're not on the pan.
Yeah, I don't need to be, I just want to have
Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start. Before we begin, we're going to give the microphone to a couple of people who have come here. I want to start by introducing Dr. Scott Lively, who has an announcement or two to make.
Thank you very much.
And just a reminder, as I said, the food will be served till 2:30, so you can continue to eat. Scott, it's yours.
Thank you very much. God bless you all. It's really good to see. I recognize some familiar faces, and I don't recognize some, but I hope that we can get acquainted as time goes on. I have formed a committee to run against Charlie Baker in the Republican primary. I ran in 2014 as an independent, and I think I proved to the conservatives that I am a genuine conservative. I do not compromise on the basic issues. I'm a full spectrum conservative, and I am not going to, I don't compromise. I don't water down my views in order to satisfy the media. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity to be able to meet all of you and prove myself and my viability as an alternative to Mr. Baker, whom I think is worse than if we had elected a Democrat. The problem with liberal Republicans is you can't get rid of them when they're in there, because they end up with 71% approval, which I think is actually not true. But it's certainly higher than it ought to be. Why? Because he's unifying the left in both parties. And frankly, I call it the uniparty. You've got the elites of the Republican Party, the red team, and you've got everybody on the Democrat Party, it's the blue team, and they merge together and they become the purple team. It's the uniparty, and they just share the same values. They're secular humanists They may hold, they may actually be a member of a church or a synagogue or something, but they're secular humanists. Their worldview is rooted in Marxism. Their value system is social justice, and you know, the political correctness is their way of life, and that has to be stopped. I was born and raised in Shelburne Falls, and my family. I was raised Roman Catholic. I was an altar boy at St. Joseph's there in Buckland. I went to Mohawk Trail Regional High School. Everybody else go to Mohawk? I don't know what the chuckles are for. I dropped out of there if that helps. I discovered alcohol when I was 12. I started smoking pot when I was 14. I dropped out of school in 10th grade, and I was on the far left on all the issues. I had long hair and a button that said "Smash the State." I was a far lefty. I finished my high school and got my high school credits in a hippie alternative school called the King Philip Project, named after King Philip, who jumped off the cliff rather than surrender to the white people. And so that's my background. And I got spent 16 years in bondage to that, and then surrendered my life to Christ. 1986, healed and delivered, never had another desire to drink, drugs, or drink ever again. I became a pastor. I became an attorney. I'm a constitutional law attorney. I've written 5 books. I've been on more than 800 radio and television shows all over the world. I've been to 58 countries. And the reason I'm here is I was on Christopher's radio show, the Meat and Potatoes radio show the other night, talking about President Trump, who I support vigorously, and I did with a number of articles. And I spent the last 2 years, well, up until about 6 months ago, I was in, I did a world tour of the populist movement. I was in Western Europe, I was in Eastern Europe, I was in Central Asia, I was in 27 countries, and I was studying the populist conservative movement because I recognize it as the hope for the world to break free from the elites that want to enslave us in a one-world government, right? That's the truth of things. So I was in Hungary and involved with Viktor Orban, the incredible Christian president there. I was in Romania. I was in Kyrgyzstan. I helped the Kyrgyzstanis change their constitution to define marriages between a man and a woman. I was in Brexit I was in London for the Brexit vote, and then I flew back here at the end of all these things the day before the election so I could vote for President Trump. So if you have the opportunity, if you'd be interested in being on my information list, sharing contacts, please write at least your email down and give it to me. I'm going to have to leave in a little while. I got an afternoon full of work to do at my office, but I'll be hanging around for about 20 minutes or so. And if you would, please give me your email at least, and then so we can connect. I have to build a network here if I have any chance of being able to take on Baker. Scott Lively, Dr. Scott Lively. I'm the and my website votelively.com, Lively, and my email address is votelively@gmail.com. Thank you for your indulgence.
We have one other candidate here who I want to give a few minutes to. Heidi Wellman is running for U.S. Senate. Heidi, give me a few minutes before we stop. That'll give Mike a chance to get back.
Thank you. Tough following behind Scott. He's quite a dynamic candidate. My name is Heidi Wellman. I am homegrown from Massachusetts. I grew up on the South Shore. I'm a graduate of Rockland High School, where I was National Honor Society and all that stuff. You can always look it up on my website, www.heidi4senate.com. I'm a good egg, nothing in the closet, nothing to worry about. Ultra-conservative. I am here to represent the ultra-conservatives who are afraid to stand up to the liberals. I am your voice. I am the one who's going to be pro-life. I am the one who's going to protect your gun rights. I am the one that's going to uphold your constitutional rights at the Senate level. I'm going to be able to get those Democrats to switch over by convincing them that the swamp needs to be drained through term limits, through instituting legislation that all of the elected officials need to be held accountable to the same laws as us. It was in the books before and it was dropped. We need to reinstitute that. And there are, in Congress right now, there are some that are willing to work with us in getting that done. With a silent majority and in keeping with Trump's populist vote, in keeping with his ideas moving forward, I am one of those candidates that intends to follow through and support Trump. And I'm not ashamed to say that publicly. I know a lot of the candidates try to water it down. I am honestly ultra-conservative. There's a lot of Democrats that are conservative that are afraid to stand up. And I'm that candidate. Again, my name is Heidi Wellman. And my website is www.HeidiForSenate.com. And I do need help with getting that 15% at the convention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heidi. And now for our main program, for those of you watching on the live stream, and we want to thank Granite Rock for their live stream, and of course, Christopher Maida, who's going to be on our panel, who's doing some recording here. I am Pete the Tech Guy, or Peter and Jemmy, depending on how well you know me. Half the door will travel, which is why I'm wearing my hat indoors. And I will be moderating this panel on President Trump, a year in review and looking ahead. So we've had a very interesting year, to say the least, which is finished with some excitement, and I'm expecting more excitement as the year goes on. And we have an excellent panel here to discuss this topic. I'm going to go through each panelist and give them a chance to say something, to introduce themselves, and something on the topic. Let us start with Mike LaChance. He writes for the Legal Insurrection blog. You might have known him previously. He used to write under the name of Alistair at American Blog. And you're also editing another website. What's that other website you're editing?
AmericanLookout.com.
AmericanLookout.com. So, Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Peter. First of all, I want to just say thank you to Peter for inviting me to this. As a full-time blogger, I don't get the chance to leave the house very often. So it's good to be out and seeing people. I'm very happy to be here. I'm honored to join such a great panel. And I look forward to answering questions and offering my opinion. Just to give you a little bit of background, since the subject of today is Trump, I'll give you a little bit of background on where I stand on President Trump. Going back to the 2016 Republican primary, during the early days of the primary, I was Scott Brown, not Scott Brown. I got
Scott Walker?
I've got Scott Brown on my mind, Massachusetts. I was a Scott Walker guy, and but at the same time, I felt that I ultimately would support almost anyone who got the Republican nomination, with a couple of exceptions. I was not prepared to back Jeb Bush, who I thought would get creamed. I also felt, as many people in the nation did, that we had had enough President Bushes. And I also wasn't terribly excited about the candidacy of John Kasich, who I also felt would get creamed in the general election. So I wasn't particularly for or against Donald Trump. I mean, I was one of the very few people in the country who was sort of neutral on Trump. But once he became the nominee, I backed him. And in the months between the time when it became apparent that he was going to be the nominee and the election, he really grew on me. And so when Legal Insurrection published a post after the election, sort of weighing in with all the authors to say, you know, where are you on President Trump? I said, in response to so many conservatives who had said that, you know, that they were never Trump, I said that I wanted to launch a hashtag called Fine with Trump, because that's where I was. I was never particularly for or against him, but once he was the nominee, I was fine with him. And once he won, I was much more fine with him. So, at any rate, that's all I have to say for my introduction. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Now, Our next member of the panel is Chip Faulkner for Citizens of Limited Taxation, who is a group which, if you are not being taxed to death in Massachusetts, you owe a debt of gratitude to it. You might remember the late Barbara Anderson founded this group. Chip is the head of this group at the moment, and also runs the monthly Friday morning group, I believe it's called, which has some excellent speakers, and I'm not just saying that because I've been a speaker there once or twice myself. Chip, obviously, as Citizens for Limited Taxation, knows a bit about taxes, so Chip, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Peter. I'm actually not the leader of the group. Chip, the other Chip Ford is.
I stand corrected.
But I'm the assistant go-around guy, which is why I'm here today. But I'd like to start off by mentioning something that happened last June. I actually went to my Holy Cross 50th reunion in Worcester, and about a month before the reunion, one of my classmates called me and said, we want to have a political forum during reunion weekend, and we're going to have you represent the conservative side. And I said, fine, and your classmate, Chris Matthews, will do the liberal side. Yes, the Chris Matthews. So we go in this forum. I thought there'd be maybe a couple of dozen classmates. There were 400 people that packed this hall to listen to the two of us. It wasn't a debate. It was more or less just coming out with our views and so on. And I started off by, and some of you who know who Chris Matthews is would find this delicious. His most famous line was probably in 2008 at election night when he realized Obama was going to be elected. Matthews said a thrill went up and down his leg. And that's probably the first line in his open. But, so when he introduced us, Chris Matthews here, Chip Faulkner, I said, well, I'm glad I'm at this forum, and especially here with Chris Matthews. In fact, as I speak, a thrill is going up and down my leg. The place went nuts laughing. They all knew, they all knew. But we got to a pretty good discussion, and I pointed out that the Republican Party is so dominant that in 26 states, they have the governorship, the House, and the Senate. The Democrats have 6. In fact, you can go from Key West, Florida, through the United States to the northern tip of Idaho and never leave a state that isn't completely dominated by Republicans. And then I said to the crowd, and who do the Democrats have for leadership? They have Pelosi, they have Schumer, they have Sanders, they have Elizabeth Warren. The average age of those 4 is deceased. And, which of course, but anyway, and it went on, and it went on very well, and we went back and forth, and it was a very interesting forum, and then thank God we had it last June and not scheduled this spring, because Chris Matthews never would have attended because of obviously the allegations that have been made against him in the last couple of weeks. The other thing I want to point out is somebody asked me at that forum, when did you realize Trump was going to be elected president? And I'll tell you when I realized it. I hang out at a couple of sports pubs in the Attleboro area. And, you go to these pubs and you get to know a lot of the regulars. Well, I realized by the end of the summer of 2016, every white male that I was friendly with was for Trump. And it wasn't some of them or most of them, it was all of them. And they were very vocal about it. It wasn't like, oh, gee, I guess I'll go for it. It was, I'm for Trump 100%. And I must have heard this 50 times. He's saying what I'm thinking. I must have said that 50 times. And that, I think, is what elected him. Now, I just want another minute or two, because I just want to read something that was in the Wall Street Journal the day after Christmas by a Main Street column by a guy named William McGurn. I just like to read this because this capsulizes exactly what Trump has done. This time 1 year ago, the assumption dominating political coverage was that the only people more stupid than Donald Trump were the deplorables who elected him. Since then, of course, President-elect Trump has become President Trump. Over his 11 months in office, he has put Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court and 4 times as many judges on the appellate courts as Barack Obama did his first year. Recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord, adopted a more resolute policy on Afghanistan than the one he had campaigned on, rolled back the mandate forcing Catholic nuns, among others, to provide employees with contraception and abortion, signed legislation to open up drilling for oil in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, initiated a bold deregulatory assault on the administrative state, and topped it all off with the first major overhaul of the tax code in more than 30 years. And yet, that Mr. Trump is a very stupid man remains the assumption dominating his press coverage.
That says a lot about what people are thinking. Thank you very much, Chip. Now, our next guest should be familiar to any of you who were at our last event. She did an impromptu interview with our main speaker, Robert Stacey McCain, that people are still talking about. I gotta say, and I gotta give John Weston, who's not here today, some credit for having that idea, because it was absolutely brilliant. She is the Boston chapter president of Act for America, and if I'm not mistaken, the only person at this table who was active in the Trump campaign during the last election cycle. Let me introduce to you Diana Pulse.
So thank you all for being here, because just by being here, you're doing your part. You are. You're doing your part. You're, helping save Massachusetts and America. So thank you for having me again. This is great. I was looking forward to this. 1 year ago today, I was in D.C., and I do have chills right now. I do have chills. 1 year, I was in D.C. when President Trump got sworn in, and it's been an incredible, incredible year. And yes, I bring President Trump with me everywhere, and in fact, tonight I'm going to Puerto Rico. Not for vacation, but to help some friends down there. And the last time I went through the TSA, which was about 6 weeks ago with President Trump, they gave me a hard time. And I'm still working on my letter because I'm complaining. And I did, of course, post a video on social media. So there's a lot to talk about. And so I am the chapter leader for Act for America, but also the leader for MA for Trump, MA number 4 Trump. And we have our Christmas party on the 28th of this month. If anybody wants information on how to get a ticket, let me know. At the end, I have some flyers that I can hand out. And you'll hear more from me as we proceed.
All right, and Diana's supposed to lead that Christmas party because she likes to keep Christmas all through the year, as Ebenezer Scrooge once promised. Finally, if you were at our last event, this gentleman would have been behind the camera, but today he's in front of the camera. Let me introduce Christopher Mader from the Meat and Potatoes radio program.
Wow. Oh, amazing. Well, obviously some people know me. We are celebrating our 10-year anniversary of broadcasting the Meat and Potatoes show. And 10 years of candidate interviews and many other interviews that I've been doing ad nauseum, and I've forgotten half of what I've done. I've actually had to go back through the archives because throughout the entire year, a lot of programs will do a night of looking back, or what we're going to do over the next year. Whose phone is that? I can get shut off. What we'll do over the next year, literally, is we're going to be revisiting many of the candidates that were on, past and present, many of the past interviews throughout the entire year. So not only will we be still doing new stuff as the weeks go on throughout the year, we'll be revisiting everybody as kind of like a year-long looking back over the 10 years. It's been a long time. I started as an intern, literally off of a lark, just an invite from a friend to come and sit in at WCW Radio in Worcester, and he quite literally just asked me, he's like, well, I'm going to go out and have a cigarette. Would you like to spin some records? I was like, okay. I was like, what? I've never done this before. But that was it. That was the bug, and that was in 2008, and that's what happened. And ever since then, I had the great pleasure of meeting Matt O'Brien, John Nowicki, and Ken Mandiel from Worcester Tea Party, and that's what started the shtick the whole concept of the meat and potato show, conservative talk, and awesome rock. And that's how it all started way back then. And like I said, it's been 10 years. It's been a great ride. It's now gotten to the point where instead of me inviting people onto my show, I have actual people inviting me onto their shows now. And that's kind of the icing on the cake. And so there we are today.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris. Now, I want to start, and before I start my questioning, I want to remind everyone that there are pens and paper available. So if you have questions that you want me to ask, write them down, pass them to Matt, and he will pass them to me, and we'll have a segment where I ask your questions of the panel. But I want to start, since we already heard from you, Mike, that you were supporting the Wisconsin Governor, Scott Walker, and obviously you were supporting Trump as Massachusetts for Trump. Chris, who were you supporting in the primaries?
Trump all the way.
You were Trump all the way as well?
All the way.
And Chip, who were you supporting at the beginning of the primary season?
Kasich, John Kasich.
You were a John Kasich person. And I was a Ted Cruz person myself, and I want to start with you, Chip. Why were you, how did Kasich appeal to you? What was Kasich's appeal for you?
Well, Kasich, if you look at the resumes of people on both sides in presidential candidates, Kasich had by far the most impressive resume. I mean, he had been a congressman for 5 or 6 terms. He produced a balanced budget as chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee during the Clinton administration, the last time we had a surplus. And then he became the governor of Ohio. I think he was in his 2nd or 3rd term when he ran. He did a good job then, plus he'd been a commentator on Fox News. He was very articulate. So all those things come together, and I said, Kasich, I think, has got the most solid resume. And unfortunately, he was also probably one of the most boring people that would ever speak. To give you an example, when Kasich got up to lecture, empty chairs got up and left the room. That's unfortunately how boring the guy was. You started looking forward to dental appointments in the middle of his speeches, you know.
Okay, I'm going to jump over to Chris. Now, you said you were with Trump from the start. Why did you decide on Trump from the start?
It was his speech when he came down the escalator. It really was. It was something that, perfect showmanship, perfect Trump, right up the alley of how he does things. And his initial speech not only grabbed me, but the fact that he was just so raw in the speech elicited to me that this is somebody who isn't going to F around. Not during his campaign or even when he gets into the office. This is a guy who's going to tell it like it is. And I was having a conversation earlier about transparency. A good friend of mine, Pete Bove, out here. I was having a conversation about transparency. This is a guy who's completely transparent. Never mind his Twitter feeds. As much as you hate them, I want more of them. Okay? I want more of them because that's part of the transparency. This is a guy who gets on in front of the camera, tells it like it is, doesn't use a teleprompter, goes completely off script. And as much as some of us might grind at that, I got news for you. This is the most transparent because he's telling it exactly like it is. And somebody had said here, he's saying the things that we're already thinking anyway.
All right, it's interesting that you mentioned the escalator speech because I remember watching it and I wrote about it and I was watching everybody make fun of it. All the elites, and including conservative elites, and I listened to it and I heard what you heard, even though I said I was a Ted Cruz guy, that his audience wasn't the media, his audience was the voters, and I realized that something was going on here. Now I'd like to go over to you. You said you're a Scott Walker person. I want to ask you 2 things. First, why Scott Walker? Because Walker was 3rd on my list behind Cruz was number 1 and Santorum was number 2 for me. Why were you for Walker? And I'd like to know what you thought of the Trump escalator speech when he announced.
Well, one of the reasons that I liked Scott Walker was one of the same reasons that you liked John Kasich, was that Scott Walker is also boring. He may not have been as boring as John Kasich, but he was boring. And that was appealing to me after 8 years of Obama. And but one of the other reasons that I liked Scott Walker was because I felt that he had really proved himself as somebody who knew how to win. This was a governor who won an election, then actually had to fight and win again in a recall election. He also stood off against an army of social justice warriors who invaded Wisconsin State Capitol with drums and noisemakers and everything else you can think of.
$1 million worth of damage.
Exactly. And so he faced off against that, and he just kept winning. And I felt that if he could take that same ability to win to the general election, then he'd be great. I also find Scott Walker appealing. I tend to lean libertarian, and Scott Walker is essentially a libertarian Republican.
And what did you think of the Trump escalator speech?
To tell you the truth, I didn't see it when it happened. I was probably writing something at the time. Since then, I've got bits and pieces of it on YouTube, and I know sort of the
So you wouldn't have had the initial impression?
No.
Okay, so that's fair enough. Now, I
actually want to let me chime in a little
before you chime in, I do want to give Diane her shot first.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, Diane, you were with the Trump campaign. I'd like to know when you joined the Trump campaign, and when did you settle on Donald Trump as your primary candidate?
So this is funny because Bonnie, she's the person I reached out to start volunteering for Donald Trump. It's kind of ironic. But when I was living in Cambridge, that's a whole other story. But so I was living in Cambridge, and I had a little TV show, and my guest on the show said that Donald Trump had announced that he was going to run for president, and it's up there on YouTube. I think it was June or something, and I laughed because I thought it was a joke, and I thought, nothing will come of it. But living in Cambridge, I lived one street over from the Marathon Bombers, and that changed. It changed. I went from somebody who was not active in politics or local events to somebody who has now dedicated my life to being active and trying to save Massachusetts and America. And after that happened, I started to read a lot about what was going on in Europe, and then I decided that Donald Trump was the only person that could.
Why did you think Trump was the only person who could do this?
To be frank, and I talk a lot about political Islam and Sharia, but the word that Donald Trump used that nobody else had used was the word Muslim. And because saying that word causes people to get all nervous, and people think that you're a racist. But the fact that he was brave enough to say that, I thought he is the only person who can help our country.
Okay, Chip, you had something you wanted to say. I want to let you chime in before I get to the next question. Chris, I meant.
Oh, that's fine. One of the other things that I watched also, not only did I watch the Trump speech live when it happened, I also watched the Ted Cruz speech live when it happened, when he did it at, I think it was Liberty University, the Christian college there. He did it in the round. Another fantastic speech. Again, spelling it out, not being afraid of his Christian conservative values. And say what you want about Ted Cruz, about how he votes in the Congress, the Senate, that's fine. That's fine. Everyone has to make compromises. What I'm talking about is what happened on both of those days at both of those speeches. The left immediately went on the rampage, immediately started taking that 10-second bit, that 5-second bit, that one-liner, that one sentence, and tried to twist it. And almost instantaneously, I started seeing exactly what we were in for. We were in for one hell of a race. We were in for one hell of a propaganda game that was going to be fomented upon the American people. And if you remember, go back in the Rolodex in your heads, remember what happened in 2016. Anything Trump said, anything Cruz said, anything any of the 17 Republicans up on that stage said was circumspect. It always was. No matter what the speeches were, no matter what they said at the debates. It wasn't the context of what they were saying. It was that little 10-second sentence. And that became the aggrandizement of the left. And whether you voted for Ted Cruz, some people were for Kasich. What's that famous saying during the debates? I forget who the candidate was, but they looked out and they said, you know, any 17 of us would be better than Hillary Clinton.
Okay. All right, now,
I just want to make a quick comment in response to what you just said. Regarding the 17 Republican candidates during the 2016 Republican primary. If everybody remembers, Democrats and all of their allies in the media had a great time making fun of the fact that there were 17 Republican candidates.
Right.
Is everybody looking forward to the 500 people who are going to run for president on the Democrat side? There is no debate hall which is going to be big enough for the number of Democrats who are going to try to challenge Trump in 2020.
All right, now, USA Today, and Chip, I'm going to direct this to you first because you've spoken the least. USA Today had their report card on Trump, and the first person who wrote was Glenn Reynolds of Instapundit, and he gave Trump an A+ for not being Hillary Clinton. And that is the reason why, as he put it, that is the reason why he voted for Trump, and he remains even less Hillary Clinton than he was elected. And a lot of us, I remember when Trump got the nomination, it took me about a week or two to decide, do I want to get on board Donald Trump? And for myself, it wasn't until Father Frank Pavone assured us of his pro-life credentials, which he has been spiking the ball on that issue. When Inauguration Day came, and Trump had won, beating everybody's expectations, when that happened, what were your expectations of the Trump presidency?
Well, I remember watching it with a whole bunch of friends, and we were cheering about every third sentence. He was laying out exactly what he said he was going to do. And it wasn't one of these airy, pie-in-the-sky type things. He talked in common language and said, I'm now your president, I'm going to do bing, 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 bing. And with the common man. And he's a billionaire talking like the common man. And I think that resonated with a lot of people.
Well, what did you expect, though?
About what he did. You know, I thought he was fairly decent as a speaker. I mean, he was no Demosthenes or anything, but he was pretty good. I'd like to also point out one other thing, and this is actually, and it proves one of the reasons Trump won. There's a liberal left-wing talk show host on Channel 2 named Jim Browdy, flaming liberal. You probably all know him. I know him well because I battled him over the years on ballot questions. Pretty decent guy for a liberal, I have to admit. But he's a human being and all that. But he came out with a line several months ago when he was talking about Trump, and he said, you know, I was a Hillary supporter. I voted for her. But in some ways, when you look at Trump, you just had to agree with the guy. The guy's genuine. And he pointed out that during one of the primaries, Trump got up to speak the night before, and I forget where it was, Nebraska, Ohio, somewhere. And he says, I want everyone to come out tomorrow and vote, but only if you're voting for me. And he says, if you're not going to vote for me, stay home. And even Browdy had to appreciate that. No other politician would say that. You know they were thinking it. Yeah, come out and vote, by the way. But he said it.
Now, Diane, obviously you were with the Trump campaign. You were in Washington the day of the inauguration. What did you expect to see from Donald Trump on that day? First of all, did you expect him to achieve the things he's achieved or failed to achieve? And did you expect the media vitriol that started 2 days after the election to be nonstop? I mean, I was actually shocked to see it continually going on as if people expected him not to be inaugurated.
So the first question is the day of the inauguration. So I think that's three questions.
What were you expecting?
I think I didn't have any real expectations of that day because this was the first time that I was really that involved in a presidential campaign. So I didn't have any expectations, but I remember we were watching the inauguration. We were in DC, but we were at the Capitol Hill Club, so we weren't on the mall. And I remember crying because I just thought, this is just, this is historic. This is amazing that we worked so hard and we got him to where he was, and everybody had said, they were all naysayers. So I didn't have any expectations at that time, but I think in the last year, I marvel at what he has pulled off. And there are a lot of things that he's done that I'm sure we'll get to that many people aren't aware of, the things that he has done that will change our future, our kids' future, our grandkids' future. So, yes.
I'll take it. I got something. Pete's a little busy here. You need to understand a simple axiom that was in play in 2016, and that is we elected just some guy. And what do I mean by that? I've said it several times on my show, and many people have said, well, what are you talking about? Think about it. Strip away his billions, strip away who Donald Trump is or was. Think about it. We just elected some guy. Never elected to office, never served in the military, wasn't a senator, wasn't a governor, wasn't this, wasn't that. He was just some guy. And he captured the popularity of the country. We haven't seen this since Jackson. This is why Jackson is hanging behind the Resolute desk in his office. And of course we can go into Jackson and his history, but that's a separate show for another day. But Jackson was the same thing. He was a populist president, quite literally elected by the people. And never mind the fact that we can claim that Hillary won the popular vote. Doesn't matter. What happened over the past several years, again, I trace this through my show and my association with the Whiskey Tea Party. Since 2010, cities, counties, states, their delegations, their electors have all gone Republican. Which is why when the Electoral College vote came down, it was a runaway. And people didn't understand this. How is he winning? Hang on. How is he winning? It's like because people don't understand their political history. You know, you've been on the Republican committees. You know that over the past several years, many cities and towns across this country have turned red. This is how he was able to win the Electoral College.
It's also worth mentioning that people talk about the popular vote, but President Trump won the popular vote in 29 states, was it? So there would...
Out of 38, I think there's 3,800 and plus or minus counties in the United States. Donald Trump won well over 3,000 of them. I think it's like 3,049, some odd number like that.
Yeah, you take California out of it, and he wins the entire country by 3 or 4 million.
Yeah, California is a big difference. It's sort of like the 1960 World Series when the Yankees won each win by 10 runs, but the Pirates won 4 games to 3.
Yep.
Now, I want to go back to Mike. Now, obviously, if you had to name Trump's accomplishments, there are several that we could talk about, but what is the thing, I'm going to ask all of you this before we start to get to some of the questions that are in my pocket. What are the things that you were most pleased to see come from the Trump administration, and what's the thing that disappointed you? That you either that he did, that you didn't like, or that he didn't do that you wanted him to do? We'll start with you.
Well, I'll start with, let me start with the negative, because that's quick. I really, I've become so desensitized by the media's non-stop 24/7 criticism that whenever something comes up that's supposed to be a negative of Trump, I almost automatically dismiss it. So that's to answer your question, what I'm disappointed
Now, before
about.
you go on, I want to ask this, because this is something that I've heard from a lot of people, that it's reached the point where when people start to criticize Trump, they just tune out because every moment there's been this. Has that been true for the rest of you?
Oh yeah, I tune it out. Sure. Anything negative, yeah.
Chip, have you reached that point?
Yeah, just dismiss it.
Diane?
Yeah, I would say.
So, I mean, all of us have reached that point, at least all of us up here. And I want to expand on it. I know you're going to name the thing that he did that you like, but does the media understand
No.
that they have done that they're doing this?
No, they have no idea. They have given up all pretense of objectivity. Not that they ever had any, but they're not even trying to hide it anymore. And they have no idea that majority of Americans have completely tuned them out. That how ridiculous they look by jumping up and down and screaming over every single thing that Donald Trump ever says.
And the thing you like the most that he accomplished?
I'm happy with a lot of things that he's accomplished.
Name one.
Neil Gorsuch, the economy, unemployment is way down, jobs are way up, the economy is booming, and ISIS is on the run. What's not to like?
Now, I want to go through and I mentioned the economy, and I'm going to bring up a stat that I'll wager nobody in this room knows. And you might know because Citizens for Limited Taxation is a specialty for you. The Gallup organization takes a poll every year on what is the most important issue to deal with. And since 2008, the economy has been either number one or number two, with as many as 40% of the country saying that the economy is the number one problem of this country, or the number two problem. One or two has been the economy for the last 10 years. And I looked at the numbers for 2017 at the end of the year, the first year of Donald Trump. When his term started, the economy was the number one issue. Right now, not only is the economy listed as their number 5 issue, but the number of people worried about the economy is the lowest they've measured since 1999. So I ask you, because again, Citizens for Limited Taxation, the same question I asked Mike, what do you like, what do you dislike, and what does these words about the economy mean? I especially wanted to ask you this.
Yeah, well, number one, the thing I dislike most about him is his excessive use of Twitter. I mean, I don't even know what Twitter is. I mean, it sounds like something a parrot does for sign language or something. But put it this way: if Twitter did not exist, I can't even pronounce it right. If it did not exist, I swear he'd be 20 more points ahead in the polls. Because if you notice, anytime he gets in trouble, even when he says some highly negative things that people don't like, it's always using that damn device. And if you just, and it turns away from some of his policies that are very good, because they focus on what he's doing with his thumb. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So I dislike that. The thing I like about him is he's done, and maybe we can get this further in the program, but I love his cabinet appointments, especially Scott Pruitt, EPA, and I can talk about that later. But another thing I like is he's done some little things that go under the radar that people don't know. For example, the Federal Register, which deals with a gazillion regulations, it actually reached over 95,000, almost 96,000 under Obama. Trump, in the last year, has reduced that by 32%, the Federal Register. You have to have someone...
And the Federal Register means the regulations.
The regulations, the red tape, the things you have to do. Another thing he did was, Obama administration had a Title IX letter, which basically was sent to colleges to eliminate due process in sexual assault cases. He got rid of that letter, so that now anyone charged, whether in male or female, admittedly mostly male, has rights. And it's not, she said, all right, she said this, all right, you buddy are out of college. That's the way these colleges have turned into, without giving the guy a hearing, anything under the Bill of Rights, that's gone with these colleges. The Trump administration has gone after that. One other thing, he's gone after let me see, the MS-13 gangs. The MS-13 gangs, mostly Salvadoran, based mostly in California, are a murderous bunch of assassins. They murder, they kill, they use a machete as their main topic. And Obama, Trump is going after that group. He's getting the FBI, he's getting the feds to hunt down these murderers, and something the Obama administration never really dealt with. In fact, I get a quote from the Boston Globe. They called them, Trump called them animals. What the Globe called them was just a bunch of highly organized gangs of immigrants. That's what the Globe called MS-13.
I don't remember the Globe ever referring to the mafia as a highly organized gang of immigrants. And maybe it's just because I'm Sicilian, that never hit me there.
The only thing, the line I remember about the mafia is when I talked about the Rhode Island economy, and I said, the Rhode Island economy is so bad, the mafia has laid off 3 judges.
All right. Now, the next person to talk here is Diane, but you mentioned something that was one of the questions I've been asked, and I'm going to ask this question first before I go to Diane because I want to play on this because you brought it up. One of the questions I have in my hands, and if you haven't written down a question, feel free to write down a question and pass it up, and it'll get to me. The question was, does the team wince or cheer at Trump's tweets? Is Trump a disciple of Sun Tzu? Now, I'm going to ask you to answer that question first, Diane, because I know what my answer is. Good. And we've got Chip's opinion on this
Are we
right
ready?
now. Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
I love his tweeting. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I love it because the man is brilliant. You have to see beyond. You have to see beyond. Okay, so
Am I on the griddle here?
Yes, you are. Yes, you brought it up. So he's brilliant when he does that because he's getting so many more people involved. They're paying attention. He's getting his name out there. He's distracting from some things and bringing attention to others.
And I want to jump in as you said that because every time President Trump tweets, and I wrote a post about this very early when he announced, and I showed the number of Twitter followers, how the only person who had as many Twitter followers running as Trump was Hillary Clinton. And now literally he can reach, 43 million people follow him on Twitter, which is more than all of the broadcasts
across the globe,
across the country.
People love him in other countries.
Well, a lot of people who follow him don't necessarily love him on Twitter.
I get it. But what I'm saying is he's role modeling what a leader, what a strong leader, right? And he's doing that despite everybody saying not to tweet.
Now, I want to get Mike's comment on tweeting because I know you, because I'm going to go to you next. As soon as Diane's done with her, I'm going to go to you, Chris. So, did you comment on the tweeting?
Trump would not be president without his Twitter account. I don't mind the tweets. I was saying this to Matt before the event began. I cover politics for a living. And being from Massachusetts, I have plenty of liberal friends and I have liberal family members. They follow Trump's Twitter feed more obsessively than I do.
And so they'll get information before the media can report on it, so they get Trump's spin first.
They do. And in terms of that, you have to remember, it is social media. It's a social media platform. And it allows him to go directly over the heads of the mainstream media and speak directly to the people.
Okay, Diane, I want you to have a chance to finish. What were the thing you liked the most and the thing you were disappointed the most?
So the support, because that's our future, right? And that's our kids' future. That's the future of the country. I have to honestly say, even if he says something that raises an eyebrow of mine, I always think there's something next coming. So I don't settle on a particular thing because I feel like he's like Bill Belichick, the two of them, right? They're always thinking like 3 or 4 plays down the line. And so I wait. I'm very patient.
So there's nothing that you have to criticize?
I just wait to see how, but I want to say that the press, they do know what they're doing because remember, a lot of people in the press have relationships with people in politics or relationships with people in business, and this is a war, and President Trump is going to affect the money that goes into their pockets, so of course they have to go hardcore again. So I don't know that I expected at this level, but I knew they weren't just going to lay down.
So, Christopher, what you liked the most, what you liked the least, and you already commented a little bit about the Twitter, but feel free to expand on that.
Well, first of all, I have to understand that media is running the same leftist gambit and propaganda that they've been running since Walter Cronkite claimed that the war was unwinnable. Yep. It's what the media says. Ipso de facto, from God's lips. That's it. That's what they say. The great thing about Donald Trump using Twitter is that, and I concur what Mike said, I think it's absolutely fantastic. He does get right to the point. 43 million people, more than most of the media, roughly plus half of his actual voter base, and people follow it. And what's happening here is that people see the Twitter And it's causing something that we haven't seen in a long time in this country. It's causing the people to actually look at the tweet and do their own research. Usually what happens, again, the left is using the same Walter Cronkite axiom. It's like, the left says it, everyone's like, okay, what's for dinner, honey? They just believe it, and that's it. Donald Trump is tweeting, and people are saying, well, what is that? Oh, well, I gotta go look it up. And then they figure it out. So I concur with what Mike had over there. Also, you need to understand, Chipnet had said something about him. If he tweeted less, polls would be bigger. First of all, folks, polls now are circumcised. There was a time when Zogby and Rasmussen were the only two that you could trust because they actually went to voters, registered voters. But as we saw in 2016, those two organizations were compromised. So anytime an ABC, CBS, even a Fox News poll saying Trump is this, Trump is that, down 22%, believe it. Completely throw it away. Because these are the same polls that said that Hillary Clinton was 97%.
Now, what was the thing you liked the best and the thing you were most disappointed with over the last year?
I was disappointed with absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Everything he's done, even the things that at certain people say, well, Donald Trump failed in this. Donald Trump, first of all, never fails. Let me tell you something about the great thing about business negotiation. I took some notes here. Let me tell you something about the great thing about business negotiation. First of all, and it works in politics too, ask for everything. I want the entire kitchen and sink as well. Then you do negotiate down from there so that you actually end up with what you actually want. And this is how Donald Trump operates. Donald Trump asks for the kitchen sink, and then he ends up getting what he wants. What happened when he had that meeting? And he let the press in there for 40 minutes, and he said, give me any bill, I'll sign it, whatever. Everyone immediately jumped, oh, Donald Trump's selling us out. Nobody gets Donald Trump. Nobody stands. He's asking for the kitchen sink. He's asking for everything. And then he went on the press the next day, and he says, no, DACA's off the table, the wall is still on the table, no one's changed. Which is why we're at the shutdown now, because the Democrats are like, we can't figure this guy out. And let me get this up. I'll let you go on. Had Scott Lively on the show tonight. One of the great things Scott Lively pointed out. I knew this, but Scott Lively alliterated it very well. Donald Trump is doing this over here. He's doing this over here. And everyone's paying attention to this over here. Meanwhile, he's doing this over here. And no one's paying attention to that. Go ahead.
All right, I want to on something that you said that is also one of the questions that we were asked, since you just mentioned the government shutdown, and that's in the news right now. This question, the Democrats were going to shut down the government to see, as a matter of distract from the Trump dossier news that's come out. It's very interesting. There's a classified report concerning the dossier, and something has happened that back in 1996, when this Ken Starr report came out on Bill Clinton, where Republican after Republican before impeachment went over there and read it and came out astounded at what was being reported, but Democrats religiously refused to look at it. And other than Democrats who were actually on the Intelligence Committee, no Democrat has gone to read that report that all members of Congress have a chance to read. Do you think, well, one has. Okay, I stand corrected later on. Which one?
I don't know who it was.
Last night
there was one. So I want to go through the panel here. Very quick question and answer on this. Is the shutdown a distraction by the Democrats? Is this them trying to feed their base on DACA? What's the business with the shutdown? I ask you, Michael Chase.
This also goes back to something that Matt and I were discussing before the event began. In case you haven't noticed, the left has a very recognizable pattern when it comes to how they perceive the right. And they always do the same thing. First, they ridicule us. Then, they copy us. So, in the beginning of Obama's presidency, the Tea Party formed. It was a true grassroots movement. And it was roundly ridiculed and mocked by Democrats and the social justice warrior crowd and their media allies. What did they do a few years later? They formed the Coffee Party, Then they formed, and that didn't work. So then they formed an organization called No Labels, and that fell on its face. And then finally they formed Occupy Wall Street, which was the filthy version, leftist version of the Tea Party. And if you hear them now, I mean, this whole quote-unquote resistance movement is the left trying to replicate the Tea Party and the success of the Tea Party. Oh, well, that was before. But at any rate, to answer your question, what the government shutdown is all about, in my humble opinion, what the Democrats are doing, is they saw that the government shutdown, what was the last one, 2010, 2014?
No, it was 2013. 2013.
That government shutdown did not hurt the Republicans in the following midterm election. And I think that the Democrats are just, they're copying, they're trying to replicate. They see a success and they try to replicate it. I think that that's part of it. I think that they keep talking about this blue wave that's coming in 2018. I'll believe it when I see it. I mean, if it happens, but I do not believe it. But I think that they're trying to replicate the success of the Tea Party. They're trying to follow the same game plan that led the Republicans into power.
Okay, Chip, the shutdown and the blue wave comment, and given the economy, is that blue wave about to hit a rock?
Well, just on the government shutdown, I've probably experienced 3 or 4 of them over the last 20 or 30 years. And you notice one thing, they never last long. And the reason they don't last long is, and the Democrats and Republicans both know this, is that if the shutdown went on and on for weeks or months, no one would notice. And they would say, the feds, my God, this has been a holiday for us. So they make damn sure they're short.
It's actually worth mentioning that there's a big difference between this shutdown and the last one. You'll remember the last shutdown, the President Obama made it a point to try and make pain. This time the President has said, and the administration has said, people will still work, they just won't get paid yet, because what happened in the other shutdowns is people didn't work. When the shutdown was over, they were paid for the time they didn't work. This time they're apparently expected to work if they're going to get paid for it.
Right. Yeah. The second comment about the blue wave, or supposedly the Democrats are going to take over Congress and possibly the Senate. We're in January. This election is in November. And in politics, that's an eternity. I mean, things can turn. Yeah, you can have a blue wave right now, possibly. But next summer, something might happen that turns it completely around. That the Republicans overwhelmingly retain Congress. I mean, it's just way too soon to even remotely predict what's going to happen in November. I mean, I think even the Democrats would concede probably the Senate. It'd be almost impossible for them to take over the Senate. And then they're talking about some of these congressional seats are going to go, possibly a few. But they've actually, both parties have made sure that the requirements and the fundraising and everything has so favored incumbents. It's very, very difficult to beat an incumbent, especially in Congress. And so I don't see a blue. I don't see anything right now. I think until you get to the summer, and at the very earliest, are you going to notice any trends?
Okay, Diane, let's go to.
Can I answer that, Peter?
Was that your question that you were asking?
Well, what he just says. Unfortunately, right now, it looks like a lot of incumbents are not going to run again.
Well, that's something that we'll touch on. Now, Diane,
just one quick comment. The first Bush presidency, after the Gulf War, he had something like a 90% approval rating. It was the highest I think ever recorded. And less than a year later, he gets beat by Clinton.
Now, Diane, actually, I'm going to raise 2 points with that, because we're talking about the shutdown. We're actually merging a lot of questions at once right now, because we have somebody asking about Trump's 30% approval rating, government shutdown, the Trump approval rating, the election coming up. What is going on with this? Are Democrats in a bubble not seeing what's happening, or are we in a bubble not seeing what's happening?
I think I liked what Mike said about, the Democrats wanting to shut down the government because it worked well for the Republicans. So I do like that, but I think something very basic could be going on. I think that they're testing Daddy. I do. I think they're testing Daddy to see how far they can push the limits. Yeah. I do. I think there's some level because...
Now, are they trying to separate him from the Republicans in Congress, do you think?
No, I think they're fighting for their money and their power.
Yeah.
That's all they care about, because let's face it, there are Republicans who are on the same camp as they are, right? So he is threatening their bank accounts, right? All the promises that they made to all their people that keep them in power for years and years and years, he's a threat to that.
Right.
So I think that they're pushing him. But there are three things that are going on, or that have gone on. One is the dossier. So whoever asked that question, yes, it could be a distraction to that. But remember, Hawaii had a threat, right? Was it last week?
Last week, the false alarm.
I was listening to the news, and right before the threat, that the news report came, that the threat, a reporter came on and said that there was news about the Las Vegas shooting. And then it was within 10 minutes, the Hawaii threat thing, we got the news about that. And I think that there are things there with that Las Vegas shooting that it seems like every time a reporter puts something out there, it gets nixed. So I think there is something going on with that.
There is some new news concerning that. Now, Chris, I want to go to you on this. And again, you talked about not trusting the polling, the Trump's polling over there. I talked about the polling concerning the economy. Is this a distraction? Is there a blue wave? Is Trump's popularity actually a problem going into the midterms? Or is it too early, as Chip was saying, to even think about this?
The answer is no, no, and no. First of all, the shutdown is Democrat suicide. They are basically basing this entire thing on DACA and protecting illegals over paying our military, which is fighting the war of our generation. That's basically it. That's basically it. While the press, and as I said before, the Walter Cronkite axiom, while the press will constantly blame the Republicans, what I just said a second ago is actually what is. As usual, as in 2013, 2014, and I went down there with the Tea Party about the whole defunding of Obamacare. I went down there for that rally. It was the same thing. The Republicans gave the Democrats everything they wanted except this one thing. They stood on their principles. Defund Obamacare. They did the same thing again now. We gave them everything. CHIP, of continuing resolution, funding for whatever silly program they wanted, except no DACA. We'll revisit it in March. This is the other crazy thing. It's not being revisited until March. It's not even up. And the Democrats said no. Gave them everything. Like spoiled little children. We gave you everything, and you're still not happy. This is Democrat suicide. So the blue wave, to hell with that. That ain't gonna happen. People will remember this. This is exactly how the Democrats operate. Diana Ploss said this earlier, it's about power. I've written about this many times on my blog, talked about it many times on my show. It is never about parity, it is never about equality when it comes to the Democrats or with liberals. It is always about power.
All right, we're going to get to the next question. Before I get to the next question, I want to remind everyone that there's still one more shot to hit the buffet, so go and hit the buffet if you want some food. The food is good. They're going to stop serving that in about 10 minutes, so if you want some more food, go and get it. Our people at the panel will not be insulted. They'll just be jealous because they're not going to get a chance to get it yet.
But before you go on, I want to talk about the dossier really quick. This Trump dossier has been completely invented. We are seeing completely throughout the news the entire exposure of Christopher Steele, Fusion GPS, the DNC buying it, the FBI buying it, the Podesta leaked emails, WikiLeaks, even Julian Assange has been on Sean Hannity's shows 6 times with an in-depth interview. And Julian Assange has openly said on those 6 interviews, no, the Russians didn't do it, from afar. And he says, well, how do you know that? He says it's because of what they call the baud rate, B-A-U-D, the download rate.
That's the download speed, by the way,
right.
for those
Any
of you on technically.
Any of you who ever do anything on your computer, you have a stick, right? It's like, oh, I want to download this file. You stick the stick in, you hit send, blah, and it like zip lines. And there it is on the thing. If you try to download something from the internet, it's like, well, I think I'll go have a cup of coffee, maybe go take a leak or something, and then I'll come back and it'll be halfway up there, right? So the entire concept of the Podesta emails being leaked by the Russians, and the Russians they're spying on it, and they took the Trump election. It was false, because what WikiLeaks was able to find out is like, yeah, this stuff happened at somebody was sitting down at the computer and they stuck a stick in there because of the baud rate, the download rate. It's, whoop, there you go. Pull the thing out, throw it in your pocket, go. So the Russians could not have either hacked the election, hacked Donald Trump, hacked Podesta. This was done from the inside by the DNC itself.
Okay, let's let Mike comment on that, and then I want to get to the next question, because I tell you, you guys have some great questions here. You're making my life a whole lot easier, because you've got some great questions, some of which I was getting ready to ask myself. So.
I'll be brief. I just want to follow up to what Chris was saying. For anyone who is not aware, the left, and when I say the left, I mean sort of the base of the Democratic Party, not necessarily elected Democrat officials, although some of them too. But what I'm talking about now is the base of the Democratic Party, the social justice warrior left. They have two goals right now. If you're not aware, they have two goals. Their number one goal, 14 months after the 2016 election, is still to remove Trump from office. They are still trying to declare the 2016 election null and void so that they can remove Trump from office. That's their number one goal. Their number two goal, if they can't remove Trump from office, is to communicate directly to Democrat leaders to not let Trump achieve anything. And that is another reason why the shutdown is happening. Is because if they can't remove Trump from office, then the second best thing that they see is just paralyzing them.
Okay, I want to get to this next question, and it plays on that. I'm going to start with you on this Chip. And he talked about 2020 and 2018. Can you comment on the country's changing demographics for 2020? You know, is it going to be DACA kids, illegal immigrants? And I saw on CNN yesterday them talking about the president's speech at the March for Life and how Trump is the ultimate base politician. Is the GOP base going to be enough to win in 2020? And now that the Democrats know that Michigan is in danger, now that they know that Wisconsin is in danger, now that they know for sure that Pennsylvania is in danger, and even Minnesota, will we see shenanigans that they didn't bother to do last time because they figured Hillary had it in a cakewalk?
Well, in the spring of 2016, might have been summer, Ann Coulter wrote a column, I remember it vividly, in which she said, don't despair about the black turnout, the Hispanic turnout that's going to croak the Republican Party. Think about an increased white male turnout. And she was the only one preaching this. Everyone else said, oh, you know, we got to go check out all these other groups. And she, I don't know, is this still on? Yeah. And she was right in her calculation because the white male turnout did increase. But the other thing you got to notice is the number of illegals flooding into the country has dropped dramatically. Even Republicans have to admit that it's dropped. I think a couple of years ago it was because of the economy. Now it's because of increased surveillance. The wall near Yuma. I have gone on 3 border tours in the last 5 years with the Center for Immigration Studies. And we go right along the border. We did one along Yuma, San Diego, Tijuana, and we talked with border officials. And they said, the wall has worked, despite what they say about the wall. So we used to have 400 come over a night from Tijuana into San Diego. Now it's maybe 20 or 30 at most. And they have helicopter surveillance. They have increased helicopter surveillance. They have about 5 times as many border patrol agents along the border going along California, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas than years ago. So that has stopped that group of people from coming in.
And it's also worth noting, by the way, that I don't know if any of you have seen this in the news, but they have been testing wall prototypes, and they had Army commandos trying to get over, and they've decided, okay, this wall high enough is going to stop people. And despite what Jose Ramos and other people are saying, so is this going to be a base election next time around, or are the demographics going to hurt the Republicans?
I don't think the demographics are going to change that much. For example, if you look at the birth rate for evangelicals as opposed to, let's say, liberal Democrats, the evangelicals, 3 or 4 or 5 children per family. The Cambridge liberals, maybe 1 or 2. So you've got that birth rate trend that's going to help the Republicans. And I think a full-blown effort for the Hispanic vote is going to help tremendously, because Hispanics are very family-oriented, which is what the Republicans are. They're family values. And if that hits a nice chord with the Hispanics, the Democratic Party is going to be a minority party for decades.
Okay, Diane, I want to switch with you because there's 2 issues that I think have been huge. First, the economy, as I've already alluded earlier, and of course ISIS. I mean, you're with Act for America, which is the largest national security lobby around here in the country. And ISIS. When Obama was president, they were calling ISIS the second team. Now they actually are, because the president has let our military do what it does best. Is this going to be a base election? Are the demographics going to hurt the president? Or is this going to be a results election where they see how the country is and say, I don't want to change?
I think you'll see, I think he will get more votes. I do. And to add on to the to illegal immigration, the number of refugees coming into the country is way down. And the refugees that were coming over would have high birth rates. So that will actually help, in terms of the population. But you had asked a question earlier about how the economy went from being number 1 on people's minds to number 5, and I think having a very strong president has caused people's anxiety to go down, and so because their anxiety has gone down, then they're not thinking about it as much, and they're seeing that the jobs are being created, and they see the future for their kids and for the grandkids. So I think that's one of the reasons why it went from 1 to 5.
All right.
I agree.
Chris?
No, I agree with what Diana just said. James Carville, famous Democrat, is the economy stupid. But he was right at that great saying. But because we have a resurgence in the economy, I think the American people are able to focus on more of these other tangible issues that we have to face. If people don't have jobs, they can't get a paycheck, they can't pay their bills. As much as terrorism might be a concern, as much as illegals might be a concern, all these other issues might be a concern, it does take a back burner. I'm not bringing in a paychecker. You, everybody. It's your family, it's your children. This is what you got to do. So it does take a back burner. But now that this is happening, now we're able to focus on these things. I want to cover a couple of things here before we move on. Roger Stone gave a great interview a little while ago. He called it the ABC principle of how to defeat Donald Trump, which is what the left is doing. First, they started with the Russian collusion. Failed. That's A. B. Claim that he's unstable. Failed. C. And here's the horrible thing, but I will adjust it. He posited that possible an assassination attempt. When I interviewed Scott Lively, one of the things that he had mentioned is a Saul Alinsky tactic of freezing your opponent. This shutdown is an Alinsky tactic. Freeze your opponent. The economy's doing great, the tax bill went through, everything's rushing forward, everyone's loving Trump, everything's going fine. Oh, let's freeze him in place with this shutdown. Let's freeze what he's doing. Let's stop what he's doing by any means possible. That's another Alinsky tactic. By any means possible, no matter what it takes. So there are 3 things. The Russian collusion failed. Claimed he's unstable failed. We have yet to see how this third principle
Well, it's
of
interesting.
freezing him.
It's interesting to mention because you just had the assailant who attacked Senator Rand Paul pleading guilty to the felony assault. We also had the assassination attempt on Steve Scalise. So those are all things to consider. And I want to get to another question here. And this is a question it's a little uncomfortable in terms of the phraseology, but there's no way of asking the question without putting it this way. Now, the shithole comment.
Love it.
Mike,
Love it.
do you think that this was a plan to produce the anger and frustration on the left to make them react? Because one of the things that I know on my site, I've used that phrase over the last week a lot more than I've used it probably my entire life. And there's been a lot of ironies out of it. For example, I don't know if any of you know this, and if you read my site at techguyblog.com, you may know this, that Canada has actually sent members of parliament to Little Haiti in Florida to tell them, don't come to Canada looking for asylum for Trump because we might deport you. So basically they're saying, how dare Donald Trump call Haiti a shithole, and if you're Haitian and you're trying to come here, we're going to send you there. So what about this comment? Is it hurting him? Is it helping him? And is it true?
I do not, well, first of all, I don't care if it's true or not. Second of all, I do not believe it's hurting him. Third of all, and this is an absolutely true story, I was watching TV when this all broke about that particular comment, and my reaction was this. I laughed out loud, and then I said, that sounds like something my dad would say. And here's the thing. If it wasn't true, then why are so many people from such countries trying to come to the United States? I mean, frankly, it's no shot at the people of Haiti. Our heart breaks for the people of Haiti. Our heart breaks for people of any country that is so ravaged by poverty and corruption. And the last thing I'll say is, the media has made lots of hay out of this. If you watch CNN,
5 days of it.
Oh, they said the word over and over and over and over again on CNN. I think somebody counted. Joe Concha of The Hill was on Tucker Carlson one night this week. Yeah, over 100 times. CNN in 24 hours said the word. But what they never talk about is the fact that the Clinton Foundation went to Haiti after the 2010 earthquake and basically, looted the place and then left with all the cash. So I think that's worse in my mind.
Well, in fairness to the Clintons, it proves that they are equal opportunity crooks. They will rob from the rich and the poor, which makes them.
The S-hole comment goes to something that Chris said early in this discussion, which is that Trump uses very regular guy language. Yeah. He's a construction guy. Yep. He's in the construction business. Right. Do you remember during the election, before election day, there was an interview with Donald Trump Jr. where he said, my father would go to the job site and he would actually walk around the job site because he wanted to talk to all the guys on the job site. That's the kind of man he is.
Okay, Chip, let's go to you.
Yeah. The comment he made about those countries, the one thing people have been aware of for years, before he even made this comment, is that Haiti, El Salvador, the 3 or 4 countries he mentioned, they are among the most corrupt countries in the world. They're Haiti, when they had their latest disaster,
that'd be the earthquake in 2008.
Yeah, and they've had others before that. We have poured billions between government, state money, individual contributions into these countries. And enough to, someone once used an analogy, enough to build a $50,000 house for every family in Haiti. And it's disappeared. A lot of this has disappeared. Yeah. In fact, there was a scandal 2 or 3 years ago where some of the charitable organizations, Red Cross, Salvation Army, and so on, had ships in the harbor ready to bring in relief supplies, and they were stopped and stymied because officials were demanding bribes before they would let those supplies move off the boats. And stories like this get out. So when he uses that word to describe these countries, most people say, yeah, that could maybe be a little tough characterization, but it's still, they're among some of the most backward countries in the world, despite the billions that have been poured into them. And by the way, I got on the online a couple of days ago, I got somebody sent me a hat looking like this, and on it said, "Make America a shithole. Vote Democrat."
That's cold. That's cold.
That was.
All right, Diana, your comment on that, and one of the things, I think Ben Shapiro said it, and Ben Shapiro was not a big fan of President Trump, but it was his statement that the president's style of speaking was baked into what people would choose. People knew who President Trump was. He was already defined. The media couldn't define him. So all of this stuff, from the Stormy Daniels thing to the shithole comment, none of it's going to hurt him because it's already baked in. Is that the case, in your opinion? And is this the president trying to provoke the left into trying to deny, this is not a shithole country and we cannot dare send people back to it?
No, this is President Trump with his Bill Belichick style, right? For those who don't know Bill Belichick, he's the coach of the Patriots, the winning New England Patriots.
You'd have to be a hermit not to know who Bill Belichick is.
In Massachusetts, you'd have to be.
Some people might not know. Some people might not know what a coach is.
But anyway,
so President Trump is steps ahead of people. So he's more people, I guarantee you, have Googled Haiti, right? And what they might find out about Haiti, it's not that these countries, they're corrupt. They're corrupt. So think about this. Haitian refugees come here. We feed, house, clothe them. They send money back to Haiti. We give them aid money. So we're sending money back. They're sending money back. Our tax dollars are going back. And then their corrupt governments are using our money. That's causing more of their people to come back to us. It's insanity. What people don't know is that Haiti is sitting on the largest gold reserves in the Western Hemisphere, and also oil reserves. And what they also don't know is that the money, remember when Bill Clinton said, if just send $1, send $2, right? People were sending cash, right? $13.5 billion missing, right? The UN has been there for a very long time. They brought cholera, raping women. When the construction happened, where they said, a factory was built down in Haiti, it wasn't where the damage was. It was where the mines are going to be.
Right.
Okay, so these are people, the Clintons and other people, who are so corrupt, along with the politicians in Haiti, right? And so other countries have the same thing. Other countries have resources. So President Trump, with his comment, whether or not he said it, he's probably sitting back going, oh my God, I can't believe how easy this was, right? Because I'm sure down the line, 6 months, right, we're going to be hearing stuff about this. Hearing stuff about stuff we never would have known. So I think he's brilliant.
Okay, before we get to Christopher, if someone could grab a Diet Coke and bring one to me, I would be very happy. Christopher, before you hit one of the famous Mai Tais here, by the way, Bhutan Dynasty is known for the best Mai Tais in town, and let me give them, and I want to ask everyone to give a hand for the folks of Bhutan Dynasty. Before we do anything else, you will produce not only hopefully for this event, but the food here is great. If you are not at this event, if you live in Massachusetts, you need to come to the next event we have for the food alone. The food alone is worth the visit, in my opinion, here.
Do they deliver?
Actually, I don't think they do, which is a shame. So you got to come here. But plus, although we are delivering you via YouTube, and the live stream. Chris, your comment on the shithole comment, and I want to add something to the question to you because you would be familiar with this. Because there was another question here that I thought was interesting. Scott Adams of Dilbert seems to have predicted everything about Trump. He's not necessarily a Trump fan, but he's predicted everything. So I'd like you to talk about the shithole comment, and I want you to talk about Scott Adams, because I thought that it's been amazing to see what we've seen from him.
Yeah, Scott was absolutely fantastic in his, I think it was only like 10.
For those of you who don't know, he's the guy who draws Dilbert.
Dilbert, yeah, and talk about somebody who's very sardonic, and in his political cartoons has a real finger on the pulse politically. And so his comments, I thought, were absolutely fantastic and very apropos, considering the situation we're talking about here. The shithole comment, well, I'm sorry, folks. Look at some of these countries. Just look at them. And now, while we can talk about many of them rising, good, God bless them. That's what you're supposed to do. Adopt capitalism, adopt freedom. This is what you're supposed to do. But you can just look up any photo on YouTube and Google and Bing of any of these countries. And it's not just the physical appearance of these countries. It's the government, their environmental policy, the human rights policies, their jurisprudence policies, all of it. All of it comes into play here. Brings me back to what I said a few minutes ago about how the press grabs that 5 seconds. And what was Donald Trump saying about, well, Donald Trump being Donald Trump? It's like, well, why do we do this? Why do we report these shithole? Why can't we do something people like Norway? Instantly, boom! The press is like, oh, he's racist. He just wants white Aryans. No, that's just you and me just giving for instance. I.e., for instance, that's what it is. He didn't mean, I want no white Aryans. No, he's like, why can't we just have people coming from normal countries who actually want to do something, who actually want to be Americans, who actually want to, grow and build and do? And so we have all these people coming from these more refugees. Another 500,000. All right, put them in Detroit. Oh, look, another 300,000. We'll send them here. Even the Puerto Rican thing, hang on. Even the Puerto Rican thing, would that happen in there? Yes, it's an American property. I understand that. But now in Worcester, we have to hire like 300 more teachers. Why? Not just because we have this influx of Puerto Rican students coming from the hurricane. None of them speak English. How does this happen? How are you an American protectorate and you don't speak English? This is what they're not reporting in the press. They're saying, wow, we're going to hire more teachers to handle this influx. And there was only one person who came out and said that. And that was Turtle Boy. That's who said it.
By the way, Turtle Boy is a blog out of Worcester. Right, just to let you know about that.
So anyway, hang on. So getting on to this whole thing about, okay, so you want to get out of the United States because Trump is here, I'm moving to Canada. Well, sorry, Canada has immigration policies too. In fact, you know what the crazy thing is about Canada? Canada is actually far more stricter on their immigration policies than we are, or have been, right?
So is Mexico.
So is Mexico. Exactly. So all these actors and actresses who said they were going to move to Canada, it's like, do you know why they haven't? Because when they looked into it, they were like, oh, wait, we have to jump through all these hoops? Oh, never mind, screw that. We'll just stay here and we'll just complain about Trump and the United States. And this, as I've said on my show and in my blog, and I know it's not a real word, but listen to what I'm saying, this is the oxymoronism of liberalism. This is how upside down, bass-ackwards their entire policy and mindset is.
All right. I do want to mention something because it's worth mentioning, although none of the people who I had expected to come from my work made it. I work with a lot of people. The first language at my work, for most of the people who work there, is Spanish. Then there's Portuguese, then there's Arabic. A couple of people there are refugees, but all of them are hard-working types. And what I found interesting is most of the people there don't like Trump, but they seem to act like people who like Trump. It's as if they're getting it's as if they're being fed an alternative thing. You're getting hardworking people who are putting in these extra hours, who are saving up and who are doing these things, who are getting the advantage, but they're getting, because they're not speaking, many of them aren't speaking English, it's as if they're getting their media from another spot. And I want to touch on that because we talked about the countries, but there's also places like D.C. where the murder rate is very high. In D.C., in Baltimore, in Chicago, and of course there's the murder of Seth Rich, which we're still not hearing much about. Mike, is all this stuff going to bite the Democrats? Are these problems in the inner cities where remember President Trump said to the black community, what have you got to lose? And now his popularity among black men and Hispanic men has doubled from what it was. Now granted it wasn't that high to begin with, but is this a change? Is this the problems in the inner cities and the success of the economy, is that making a change with black men and Hispanic men who are now finding jobs and getting ahead?
The answer is yes, but I think that there's still more that could be done. I think that Trump and the Republican Party would be very wise to be much more proactive on this. I forget who it was. It might have been Laura Ingraham. In fact, I think it was Laura Ingraham on the Fox News channel who said that Trump and the Republican Party should take their act to the inner city and speak directly to those people. In the same way that Trump said to black voters, what do you have to lose? Somebody needs to say that to the Republican Party and the Trump administration. You have nothing to lose by going to inner cities and engaging more than you already are. And I think that that's something that they really need to do. But when you ask, are they in a bubble, it's hard to predict, but how it's going to work out electorally. But are they is the left in a bubble? Absolutely. They have learned nothing from the 2016 election. There's a reason for that. The reason why they have not learned anything, the left, from the 2016 election, is because they still don't believe there's anything wrong with them. They still think they were just robbed of the election. So why should they change? And that might actually end up working well for us. Because if they don't change their game plan by 2020 and they go into it still, 4 years later without having learned a thing, that could work out very well for us.
Okay, now Chip, I want to add this to the question because this was a question and I think it fits with you perfectly. President Obama said we didn't build our own businesses. Elizabeth Warren talked about, you didn't build that. How would Trump deal with that kind of a question? And from what I was saying earlier about how things have developed in the black community in terms of its popularity among black men, Hispanic men, the popularity going there, is this something that's going to make a difference? Is that what is going to be the difference in 2020 or maybe even in 2018?
I'll tell you what the difference is. The difference is what I'm holding in my left hand. Last week, I run a monthly meeting with conservative activists called the Friday Morning Group. And as my guest speaker, I had a woman named Margaret Meyer come up from D.C., and she works for Americans for Tax Reform, which is the Grover Norquist group. And she brought this for everybody. What these 20 pages are, there's 7 or 8 items on each page, and each item is a company that has either increased employment, has given out bonuses, has had charitable donations, and it runs the gamut from Baltimore utilities, the inner city, to the Iowa farmlands. Now, interestingly enough, the date on this compilation, and it started pouring in after the tax reform package passed to ATR headquarters, is January 8th. Now, that's almost 2 weeks ago, and there were 140 listed then. And Margaret, in her speech last week, said, we had to stop at some point and compile this because they just kept pouring in. So my guess is 2 weeks later, this 140 or so companies in 20 pages, it's probably 400 or 500 and maybe 30 or 40 or 50 pages. And like I say, it goes across the country and with a variety of benefits. And that's not going to stop soon. And you're going to get all these companies that have these billions and trillions overseas that are now bringing it back into the country because of the cut in the capital gains tax. So I think that's very promising at this point.
Okay, Diane, I want to pass the microphone to you, and I also want to add on a piece from another question because, Steve Bannon. Now, full disclosure, I've interviewed Steve Bannon several times. I've known him for a while. We get along well. We had the Wolf book about the president where Steve is quoted. I don't know if he's quoted in context or not. The Bannon wing of the party, which is a very strong conservative, and there was the defeat in Alabama, there's the book. Is that wing going to be there for Trump, or is there going to be division because of it, or is the economy going to make the difference, or is the left's, and this is something we brought up earlier, the left's continuing attack on the president going to be enough to rally conservatives?
I think the Steve Bannon thing was an act in the play because people connect Steve Bannon with President Trump, and then they say that's proof that President Trump is a white supremacist. So I felt like my feeling was that Steve Bannon and Trump had to sever in order to have better 2018 election results.
By the way, just to say for the record, Steve Bannon is no white supremacist. I know.
No, he isn't. But yes, I don't believe. I like Steve Bannon. I think he's a true American patriot. I support him, and I just feel like that it was a charade. And I just feel like strategically that this is just my opinion, that this had to happen so that they could be separate from one another. But I just want to make a comment about liberalism, right? So I don't ever say that, okay? And I know all of you have been in politics way longer than I have been, but I think of it in money and power, right? So if you want to call them the liberal, the liberal Democrats, the Pelosi, the Schumer, that's not their ideology, right? Their ideology is green. It's money. It's power. And so what they push down to their base, right, is propaganda, right? So it's crazy when you look at minorities. I hate that word too, but they fall for this, and yet their communities are not doing any better, right, under Democratic leadership. So it just like when we say it's liberalism, I say instead of saying that, follow the money. I feel like if we were putting more out there, there's so much out on the internet that's so easy to access. If you go in to see who donates to these people and where their stocks are, it's so easy, and we would change it. When we say liberalism, we think that we're fighting an ideology. We're not.
It's sort of like when we talk about the pipelines. One thing that was forgotten was that one of the great benefactors were the railroads, who were transporting oil much more expensively. And who were they constantly quoting about the railroads? Big Democratic donors.
Right. And so that's what it is. And so the reason I think the words are important is that then we stop investigating. We say, oh, that's their mindset, we can't, right? But if we could prove, if we, constantly put out the connections, even for, I'm no fan of Charlie Baker, and if people follow me on social media, I go after him every opportunity I can get, because the guy is very progressive, right? But his progressiveness is based on the money and power, right? And so I get every opportunity I get to show a connection between him and one of his donors and what he's doing, I do it. And that's how people can see really what's happening.
Now, not that I'm a big fan of Baker myself, but in his defense, let me point out that he has turned up to support Republicans such as Dean Tran, who was elected here.
Big deal.
But you can't change the state.
First of all, he goes against President Trump at every opportunity, right? And I tried to get in. And listen, as somebody from the outside, it's so corrupt. I'm sorry. They're corrupt. They don't support everybody. They support the people that they think are on their side. So, I'm sorry. Charlie Baker, the thing is, here's the other thing. And then I'll give Chip over here.
Chris, Chip is to your right.
I know. I'm just, right? Here's what people say. Well, it's better than having a Democrat. What? What kind of response is that? The thing is, my personal belief is the whole Mass GOP needs to implode, right? And we need to stop looking at this as like, oh my God, if we have a Democrat. No, we have to start from scratch. And we have to stop thinking just one little election down the line. We have to start thinking about our future, our children, our grandchildren. That's what we have to start thinking about collectively as a state. And say, you know what? We're going to take the hit. We're going to take the hit. We're going to lose a battle. But we have in our mind the end goal of winning the war. Because otherwise, we're going to be doing this crap for the rest of our lives. And it doesn't make... And listen, I'm saying this as somebody who I've not been in politics. So I'm new from the outside, and I'm looking at it and saying, really? So because they're not a Democrat? Excuse me, in Massachusetts, 20,000 Democrats jumped over to register as Republicans for President Trump, and he got probably 500,000 Democratic votes in Massachusetts. Okay, so, what does that have to do with anything? So we have to stop falling for the propaganda from the people who say they're in our party, but they're the same thing. It's money and power. They don't care. I'm off my soapbox.
Okay, and Chris, I want to again go back to the Seth Rich thing, which I mentioned briefly, because I figured you might have a little more knowledge on this. Is that going to make a difference? Are these things, the dossier, the Seth Rich stuff, are all these things going to blow up, or are they going to be kept down? Is it going to make a difference?
Well, yes, I think this is going to be the year that we're already seeing it in the news. It's already starting to happen. It is going to completely blow up in the face of the Democrats. I think eventually, I'll posit a hedged bet here. Possibly, maybe, by the end of the year, possibly, maybe, you see the beginnings of a Hillary Clinton indictment. Possibly, notice the words I'm using, possibly, edging, kind of, by the end of the year, maybe seeing an indictment on that, because this is what's happened with the dossier. Everything that has come out on this, and like I said earlier about the Roger Stone thing, this is what's happening. The more Mueller looks into this, guess what's happening?
They're going to dig a hole.
They're digging a deeper hole, but what are we finding at the bottom of that hole? Oh, it's the DNC. Oh, Trump colluded who are these guys over here? Well, we're going after Donald Trump. Oh, wait a minute, what happened over here? Oh, we're going to go, definitely, this next person coming to the Senate, they're going to expose Donald Trump. Wait a minute, what's this going on over here? This is what's constantly happening. The more they dig, the more they're finding out the exact opposite of what they're looking for. This is why people say, hang on, I know you're chomping at the bit, I love it. This is why people are saying, well, why doesn't Donald Trump fire Mueller? Because this is what Donald Trump does. He's doing this over here. Meanwhile, he's doing this over here. That's how Donald Trump operates. I want to get back to what you said about the Democrats, gun control, the inner cities. More Democrat suicide. Facts are stubborn things. Thank you, John Adams. Facts are stubborn things. Chicago, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Detroit. Thank you. And I pick your city. Pick your Democrat-controlled city. There it is. There it is. It's been going on for a number of years, but the reason why we've talked about it, but it hasn't been exposed, because we haven't had Donald Trump in the White House. And we haven't had more and more people cluing in to what actually is going on. As far as the Steve Bannon and the Wolf book is concerned, again, getting back to what I said about the Walter Cronkite thing, this is just more of press just making shit up. They're just making it up. It's gotten so bad out there. It's gotten so bad that this is all they have left. And the rest of us are actually seeing it. Democrats are actually seeing it. They're actually, it's like, this is not the wagon I wanted to hitch myself to.
All right, I want to now I want to ask a specific question to each of you individually, because each of you have a specific focus that you're known for. And I'm going to start with you, Mike. You write about education.
Higher education.
Higher education. And Betsy DeVos, in a speech, talked about how Common Core is dead. As far as this administration is concerned, which should endear her and Donald Trump to a lot of Tea Party people. But we've also seen, because of the Harvey Weinstein stuff and all of these revelations that I would maintain would not have come out if Hillary was elected, that the focus on due process in college is coming out. What should we expect to see in terms of higher education over the next year of the Trump presidency, and what would you like to see? This is specifically for you. I'll even give you the microphone because I'm such a sweetheart.
Thank you. So, if this goes back to something actually that Chip brought up at the very beginning of this discussion, which is the whole Title IX thing. The term that the left uses for this specific topic is rape culture. And the idea is that American colleges, this is according to the left, American colleges and universities are incredibly dangerous places where none of you should send your daughters, because an alarmingly high percentage of them will be raped at college.
Now I want to just touch that. Why would you spend $60,000 to send your daughters to be victimized if this was true?
Well, I think a lot of parents don't know that this culture has taken root on a lot of college campuses.
According to the left.
And this is nationwide. So what has happened is that over the last several years, with this idea of rape culture, due process has gone away. Or at least it went away under the Obama administration. Now, this is one of the reasons why Betsy DeVos, as the education secretary, actually gets met with protesters when she visits college campuses. Does anyone even remember the name of Obama's education director? Of course not. But the reason why Betsy DeVos has become a magnet is because she and the Trump administration are going to undo some of these things. And when I say undo some of these things, what I mean is they're bringing back due process of law. Lots of colleges and universities actually have kangaroo courts on campus, where they deal with sexual assaults on campus without ever involving a single law enforcement official. This is insane. So,
and they're getting sued and losing over and over again.
Well, this is changing due to the Trump administration. It's one of the reasons why Betsy DeVos has been such a lightning rod.
Foundations. And FIRE has been, and Chris was mentioning FIRE, which has been very involved in this.
FIRE is an excellent organization, but their focus is on free speech.
Okay, that's FIRE is, by the way, the Foundation for Individual Rights
in Education. A fantastic organization. But at any rate, in answer to the second half of your question, which was, what do I think needs to happen? What I think needs to happen is a massive and total overhaul of our entire higher education system. Massive.
How about a dissolving of our entire federal agency?
From the way that it's funded, to the way that students take loans, to the standards of admission, everything across the board. That's what I would love to see Donald Trump do. I would love to see him gut and remake our entire higher education.
It's funny you should mention that, because my wife is in the audience and she can vouch for the story I'm going to tell briefly. When my son was first getting ready to go to college, we went to this event and it was talking about how to pay for college, and we're listening to what they're saying. And we looked at each other and said, basically what they want us to do is mortgage our house at this huge rate and give them money for what? I thought, why on earth would we do these things? And it was just building up debt for somebody. And is that, do you see that changing at all under Trump?
I hope so. And I have to add to this, because you brought up the whole rape culture on the Title IX thing, and that is one negative aspect of what's happening on college campuses. But that is only part of a much broader issue. What is happening on college campuses is that, whereas in the past, now I'm 47 years old, I graduated from college in 1992, okay, so, not that long ago. And when I went to college, there were no protests at my college. There were no marches at my college. There was none of that. People went to college to learn, to study, to broaden their worldview. That is not what is happening on the majority of American college campuses right now. College campuses over the last decade have been turned into identity politics factories that are dividing up students by color, race, sexual orientation, and indoctrinating students in concepts of social justice and Marxism. Students are actually applying to college now in order to get involved in protest culture, instead of going there to learn something. This is a problem. And let me tell you something. One of the terms that you'll hear if you read the Legal Insurrection blog, this is something that I talk about. This is something that Professor William Jacobson, who runs the Legal Insurrection blog, talks about. This is also something that Glenn Reynolds of Instapundit has talked about. In fact, I think he may have coined the phrase. The phrase is the higher ed bubble.
It needs to crash.
It's going to crash. It's going to crash. The student loan debt in this country now tops $1 trillion. And it keeps growing every single graduation.
And student loans are not dischargeable in bankruptcy either.
That's right. Student loans follow you forever. So it's going to reach head and it is going to crash, but I'd like to see Trump fix it before that happens.
Okay, I want to go to you, Chip. Now, you've been involved in Citizens for Limited Taxation for a while. You've seen a lot of things come and go. We have the Trump tax plan, and we have the Trump economy. Now, one of the side effects that I think is going to be an odd side effect of the Trump economy, because we've talked about how blue states like Massachusetts, the deductibility of state and local taxes are going to be curtailed for the ultra-rich. But because of a booming Trump economy, the minimum wage hikes that blue states have mandated, the tax savings from the Trump tax cuts might actually allow some of these businesses to afford them. So will the blue states actually end up using the Trump tax cuts, the savings that businesses are getting, and force that money into social programs, or forcing businesses, will they make their own regulations to make up for it? And what do you want to see Trump do next in terms of taxes? Or is there a next step, or do we have to wait and see what comes with this?
Just off the bat, I'd say we have to wait and see what comes next. But in terms of the blue states, their tendency is to take the money that's accrued in surpluses from the tax reform of any other program, is to spend it. And the classic case was Connecticut. Connecticut 30 years ago didn't have an income tax, didn't have a sales tax. They had a guy, a liberal left-wing nut named Lowell Weicker,
who was a Republican, by the way.
Yeah, who came in, campaigned against an income tax, and 3 months into his term, when he was elected, he jammed through an income tax. And Connecticut is an economic basket case. Illinois is worse, probably the worst in the country. But Connecticut is second. And they spend. And the only way to cut off the spigot is to reduce the amount of money they get, which is what we did with Prop 2.5 in Massachusetts. In 1980, when Prop 2.5 passed, the town and city was limited, their property tax levy was limited. They could only go up 2.5% a year over the previous year. So if the town of Melrose, for example, raised $20 million in property taxes, they can go up 2.5% to $20 million the next year.
That's without a vote. With a vote, they can go higher.
Yeah, with an override. If they have an override approved by the selectmen and the voters approve it at the ballot, they can go above that. But if it weren't for 2.5 and CLT, I might, as we pushed it, your property tax bills would be at least double what they are now. And your auto excise would be almost triple. But having said that, I'd like to comment on the education part a little bit.
Certainly.
The education, when I went to Holy Cross, tuition room and board totaled $2,200 in the mid-60s. It is now about $60,000. But I remember my summer job then, I make about $1,000, which would cover the tuition. And it was now a guy named Richard Vedder. He's an economics professor at Ohio University. Ohio State, Ohio University, and he's written books on why colleges are so expensive. And there's a couple of reasons. Number one is it's labor intensive. That generally 3/4 of the cost of a college, maintaining a college, are the professors' salaries. And you got professors working or teaching 3 or 4 hours a week, and they're making $100 grand a year.
Elizabeth Warren.
And Elizabeth Warren made, I think, $345,000 for one course. Yeah, and she talks about tuition. The other thing Vedder mentioned, I'm glad you reminded me, is the number of administrators. The number of administrators at virtually every college has doubled or tripled. And the number of administrators had 40, 50 years ago, you get a lot more of them. So those are the two driving things, the cost of education. Right. The other thing, I just would terrify colleges, and I've looked at this over the last 3 or 4 years, is those universities that are advertising online, like Southern New Hampshire University. Why drive to school in bad weather? Why do this when you can just open up a computer and graduate from college? If I were a college man, I'd be terrified about that 50 years from now. Most of the colleges, you'll be working out of your computer.
Especially since they're talking about rape culture. I don't think there's a rape culture in front of you either.
Right. One other quick comment. I got this last summer when I was at my reunion. I mentioned that when I was at Holy Cross, my parents lived in Norfolk, which is about 40 miles. And if I wanted to go home for a weekend, I just go out on Route 40, stick my thumb out, and I get a ride. I must have done that 25 times in 4 years. And when I go out Friday afternoon, there'd be 4 or 5 other guys out there with their thumb out. And the irony is this. It's much safer today to do that than it was 40 or 50 years ago. Because the crime rates have plummeted in the last 20 years. And I tell that to students, they're astonished. It's like I told them I just climbed Mount Everest. But do you ever see a kid today? Never.
Okay, Mike, you had a very quick comment, and then I want to get to Diane.
I just want to quickly comment on something that Chip brought up that is extremely important. And when you're looking at colleges and universities, is the administrators, not only the number of administrators and the exorbitant salaries that many of them make, but look at the titles. There was a time when you had a college president and a college vice president, and then maybe you had some particular department heads. Now you have the vice president of diversity and the social justice coordinator.
Oh my God.
And the bias administrator. These are real jobs, some of which pay 6 figures. To essentially, what they're doing is just advancing the left's agenda with your money.
With your money that you're being encouraged to borrow by the state. Diane, you're part of Act for America. As I said, it's a organization that deals with security, with radical Islam, and the whole 10 yards. Now, obviously, we've talked about the fall of ISIS and unleashing of the American military. We've also seen the court battles to stop the Trump vetting. And this is, I don't understand. Well, that I do understand, but I think it's ironic that Trump hasn't said we don't want refugees. He has said we want to vet these refugees. Because in fact, next week I'll be interviewing an Iraqi refugee, a woman who, her story is amazing. You're going to want to check my story of Hannah in a couple of weeks. It's an amazing story about a woman who's gone through some things. What do you expect to see in terms of war on terror, and will the courts eventually uphold the president's rules concerning vetting people coming into the country, which to me seems just normal? Why wouldn't you vet people? Would you just let anybody into your house? I just don't understand it.
So I think this is going to be a slow, painful process because we are at war. So I have a question for the group. How many people are worried about actual terrorism? Somebody driving and smashing into you in the shopping mall, or somebody strapping a bomb on a vest like the marathon bomber? How many people are worried about that? Okay. How many people are worried about civilization jihad? Anybody in this room know what that is? Okay, so we should be more worried about civilization jihad, because that is what's happening every single day, college campuses. If I miss some of your question, then go back to it. But this is the thing that we are not paying attention to, okay? So when you talk about the rape culture, I feel that this is related to that. So civilization jihad is exactly what's going on. The refugee resettlement program is a big scam, number one. It's a big moneymaker. We spend, at the very minimum on the conservative side, $12,000 per year per refugee. Think about that. $12,000. Okay, so if they come over a family of 4, $60,000. How many families of 4 live off of $60,000 in the state of Massachusetts? Right? So civilization jihad is connected to the refugee resettlement program. Because if you look at a map of the United States, you could see where they are strategically placing these people all over the United States, right? Then their numbers grow. They outpopulate us. They do. They outpopulate us like 8 to 1 or something, right? They come over, they say they have 1 wife, they really have 4. Okay, this is true. This is true. So this is the thing that we are not paying attention to, because you see things like what's going on, which to me smells of Sharia. So let me just tell you, Saudi Arabian money flows into colleges in the millions, in the tens of millions.
That is an issue that nobody was talking about, by the way. But this is something that
this is a
you need to know about.
huge issue. And and then I'm going to go to the Trump, which is connected to that. There are also 2 huge organizations on college campuses that are causing this problem. Muslim Student Association, look it up. There are over 600 chapters, okay, on college campuses across the United States, right? So this Saudi money comes in, it funds Middle Eastern studies. They send their own teachers over. Then a mosque comes up. They send their own imams, right? On the college campuses, they teach, the cleaned up part of Islamic history.
And anti-Semitism.
And anti-Semitism, right? And so even in the western part of Massachusetts, you have a lot of refugees, and there's also a rise in anti-Semitism. So civilization jihad, you have to look this up. Okay, so the other organization is Students for Justice in Palestine. Okay, they have over 200 chapters, and they have affiliate groups. MIT.
I want to touch on something that you just brought up, and I know you want to bring up the MIT thing. One of the things President Trump has done is cut funds to the Palestinians.
Exactly.
And I'd like you, as part of your answer to the question, how is that going to affect the Middle East, and will it make a difference?
So it will, I think, long term. So I get calls, I get emails. President Trump does something, people freak out. Okay, we're at war, right? And so these people, the Muslim Brotherhood, has been in the United States since the 1950s. Okay, so they have almost a 70-year head start, right? So one thing that President Trump does is not going to end it. So he's going to stop giving money to the Palestinians, right? The term Palestinian was invented in the 60s by Yasser Arafat.
1964.
It's BS. It's not even the truth, right? And so what do they use? They use words like Turks, right? Ottomans, Palestinians. They all practice the same ideology, political Islam. It's all the same. So Palestinians, I hate using that word, they get paid. They get paid if they blow up an Israeli, if they kill an Israeli.
Right.
They get paid. Streets get named after them. So President Trump looked at this and said, what the hell are we doing? We're giving them money to kill our friends? So
Is that
that's
the shithole comment that
that's
you
a great
made?
thing that he's doing. But I just want to throw a couple things out that he's done in the Middle East, right? He sent a strong message to Saudi Arabia months and months and months ago, right? People didn't know what he did there, right? But what was it, within the last month? Saudi Arabia, they started arresting people in the Saudi family, powerful business people.
There's been real reforms in Saudi Arabia. It's been frightening.
Whether or not these will stick, because the ideology of political Islam is that you can lie to advance Islam. So let's see, but we have a great president who will, I think, make it stick. But one of the princes, I didn't write his name.
I can't pronounce his name either.
But he's one of the guys, a billionaire, philanthropist, gave $10 million to Harvard. Okay?
Al-Waleed.
Yes, Al-Waleed. Gave $10 million to, I think, Colombia, right? So the Saudis are big problems. So dozens of arrests. You can look that up. He's also dropped an unprecedented amount of bombs, surpassing what Obama did in the Middle East to get rid of ISIS. ISIS is part of the problem, but the civilization jihad is the bigger part. He recognized, what did President Trump do? He recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and they're going to move the embassy. That's huge. He's dealing with Iran, and this recently came out. They just formed, it's called the Hezbollah Financing and Narco-Terrorism Team. Look that up. Obama is going to be has been implicated in that, right? So there's all this connection, and people overlook that big part of what's happening in our country.
Okay, I actually want to jump on something she said because I wrote about it. The Obama administration, the Drug Enforcement Agency, actually traced Hezbollah smuggling cocaine into the inner cities. And the president squashed the arrests and the going after these people because he did not want to jeopardize the Iran deal. So he literally let drugs into the inner cities where black Americans live and cocaine into the inner cities and allowed the trafficking to go on for the sake of the Iran deal. And that's what Diane is talking about. I wrote about it. You have not read about it in the mainstream media.
And that money goes back to fund terrorism. And so the last thing, Chicago, right? Chicago is like Chicago. People don't realize this. It's the headquarters for Hamas in the United States of America. Okay? So that should give you an idea of why there's so much, we have so many problems there.
All right, that's Valerie Jarrett.
Is this tied in with the Pelican Project? You know anything about the Pelican Project?
I thought that was a movie, but I don't know.
I have to have you write that down, the question on it.
I'll look that up.
Okay, now, Chris, I want to ask you a question in terms of media because you've got the radio show. Now, we've seen the media all year. It's been Trump 24/7, disaster, disaster, disaster. To the point where the fact that we're not all dead in the streets after 1 year is a great accomplishment because apparently we were all going to die, we were all going to starve, we were going to have no food, we were going to have no health care, gays were going to be strung up in the line, all these people were going to be dead and dying and so forth. The apocalypse was upon us, and yet it has not happened. Do you anticipate the media learning from this strategy? There's a great cartoon, I don't know if you saw it, of parodying the Hawaii alert thing where there's all these reporters looking at these phones saying, oh, Trump about to be impeached this, and this guy saying, I'm getting sick of these alerts. Will the media learn from this, and what will we see from the media? As a person who hosts a show and talks to people, what will we see from the media, and what will we see from the people this year concerning Trump?
No. I said this in one of your questions before. The answer is no, and second, no. The answer is no. I keep going back to the Walter Cronkite thing I said. The press is completely hell-bent, indoctrinated. They're never going to learn. They're going to completely ignore their failing ratings. Somebody's going to keep throwing money at them. It's going to continue.
Now, is this because that they've become a niche market, and because you have a niche market, anti-Trump, you have to feed that market because they're the ones who pay the bills?
Yes. Okay, so opposite. The answer is yes and yes. Yes, that's exactly what's happening. They found a niche market. They've somehow adopted capitalism all of a sudden, and so they found their niche market in selling to their audience. But as far as will the press learn from this, they won't learn from it because of this niche market. But despite the fact that a lot of this is going on around this great economy, the exposure, great piece that you just said about the infiltration of Islam in our country, despite the fact that these are front and center and are glaring, it's not going to make any difference in the press at all in any way. To expand upon that, what Mike said, college, because we are graduating the next generation of mindless, useful idiots, to coin a communist phrase here. And college, if you look at college, it falls under progressivism. One of the things you need to understand about progressivism is that they're always about segregation, always about disenfranchising, labeling, itemizing different groups. And the reason why they do this is the old concept of divide and conquer. It's easy to do that. So when you have a college that you go to college and you don't learn anymore. You're not learning history. I don't want to become a teacher. I don't want to become a scientist, a biologist, or whatever. And for the record, folks, I never went to college, so I have no say in that game. But what we're doing now is we are creating the next generation of segregationists. Sign up for gay studies, sign up for transgender studies, sign up for this studies. Oh, I'm African American, sign up for that, sign up for this. Oh, I'm Muslim, so I have to get involved in these Muslim groups. I have to do all of this and that. And that's what they're doing. And somehow it's under the guise of freedom of education. But all it is a modern day segregation. You're being marginalized into your small groups. So it's easier for the left to control you on that.
All right, now I'm going to add Mike Rogers to this because he's been filming for Granite Rock, and you are the only person here who lives in a purple state. And I'm adding you to this because I wanted to get at least one perspective from a purple state that either voted for Trump last time and had it stolen or just missed it. What will the effect on a state like New Hampshire, presuming that we don't have another 10,000 people from Massachusetts voting in your next election, what will the last year that we've seen from Trump, what effect will that have on New Hampshire politics, New Hampshire's congressional representation and so forth?
I think it'll be entirely positive. Many people in New Hampshire that were not for Trump initially have come around to it. The groundswell for Trump was much bigger than anybody really thought. You know, like one of the other panelists, I would talk to people, and I would find more and more people were pro-Trump than, and willing to say so, than you would expect. The other thing is I travel around a lot with a Make America Great Again hat on, and believe it or not, I've never had anybody throw anything, spit in my face, or say...
Now this is in New Hampshire.
Yeah, or say nasty things, and outside of New Hampshire. But I've had lots of people say, great hat, where did you get it? You know, there's something going on that you just don't see. But I also think the improvement in the economy, the fact that the governor, whilst a rather moderate Republican, is saying good things about Trump, and that there are people coming forward to run for Congress that are pro-Trump and not afraid of it anymore. I think all this helps. And yes, it was just stolen last time.
Is the media selling a false story to the people in New Hampshire in terms of what's going to happen in the next election?
Absolutely. Even the union leaders leaned over to the left, and the stories in it barely trustworthy anymore. So I actually had a couple of things I want to wind back on.
Okay, say them quickly, because after you do that, I want to give a closing shot for everybody here on the panel. Yeah. By the way, I should point out, Mike was on our last panel in Granite Rock. We want to thank Granite Rock for streaming this event to the users here. And before Mike speaks, I also want to point out that both the Worcester Tea Party and Christopher, who got here early, did some yeoman work setting up. The video is going to be available for those of you who did not come and share our meal. Shame on you, you missed out on a great meal. That will be available later. But Mike, finish your thought, and then we're going to close with the panel.
Sure. So I wanted to wind back to what you said on taxes and the Democrats' reaction to it. I think it's actually pretty funny. Not only do you have the elitism on show where the Democrats are saying, oh, $1,000 bonus, $2,000 bonus. Why isn't it a permanent pay raise? This is just crumbs. This is posturing. That in itself shows off their elitism. But that is far from the worst of it. The worst of it was when they made their case against the cap on state and local tax deductions, and they used rich Californian taxpayers as the poor victims of this tax change, and they actually used as one of their examples $1 million CXO in a California company paying tens of thousands of dollars in state taxes, in property taxes, in charitable deductions, and this poor thing was going to be a couple of tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket out of his million. Please tell me, how is this the party of the little guy? I think they have exposed themselves. And by the way, that is one of the things Trump excels at. He gets them to expose themselves. Voila, we have the Schumer shutdown. Thank you, Mick Mulvaney, one of the unsung heroes of the administration.
All right, very good, Mike. Now, I'm going to close with the panel. I want to give each member of the panel about 5 or 6 minutes. I'll give you the high sign to let you know when your time is up. I'm going to let you speak in extemporaneously. I'm going to start from this end because I've been starting with you, Michael. Tonight we're going to start with Chris. Say what you want to say about President Trump, about what you expect to see, or something that we do not know you think is going to happen. Your comments on Trump year 1 and the upcoming Trump year 2.
The economy is going to improve. It's already on its way. There's no stopping the train heading down the track. Despite what the Democrats do with the shutdown, it's all on them. Despite anything else that comes through the news media, it's going to... what's happening now is everyone is seeing the falsehoods. And we're all paying attention to the falsehoods. I had mentioned earlier about disregarding the polls. Disregard anything you hear. Next time you hear an ABC, Washington Post poll, Trump down 20%, disregard it. Disregard it. Trump will hold a rally next week, 20,000 people will show up. End of story. Get it? Got it? Good.
Okay, Chris, before you go, where can people find your radio show?
You can find my radio show basically on ktntradio.com. We air every Tuesday and Wednesday nights. And of course, I'm on Facebook. Just hit Facebook/The Meat and Potato Show. To continue what I'm saying here, on my blog, I've written a bunch of stuff about points of liberalism. And you can catch my blog, you want another shot here, thelexingtongreen.blogspot.com. I'll say it again, thelexingtongreen.blogspot.com. I'm writing a multi-part series, which is something I've done many times before over the 10 years I've been doing this show. It's called The 5 Points of Liberalism. I'll list them quite simply. 1, acceptance of the absurd. 2, selective outrage. 3, conviction of position. 4, cognitive dissonance. And 5, lack of principles. And summing them all up, these are the 5 things that we're seeing every single day in the press, every single day when Chuck Schumer gets up there and speaks, or Nancy Pelosi speaks, or any of them speaks, even on our side. There's an acceptance of the absurd, that somehow DACA is more important than our military. The selective outrage. We're upset about this one thing, while at the same time accepting the other, which is somehow intrinsically connected. And they're convinced of their position. No matter how hard you try with the liberals, they will always fight back. It's a closed-loop system. Cognitive dissonance, no matter what you say, no matter how much evidence you push to a liberal that you're talking to, they completely disconnect. All this is in my blog. And 5, lack of principle. Everything that a conservative does is based on principle. Our founders, in the Declaration of Independence, it says we hold these truths. Principles are based on fundamental truths. Our founders didn't say, you know, we kind of believe that this thing is... No, they had a fundamental holding of these truths based on principle. And so, anyway, we're writing that in the blog, and we'll be sending that out there. And I want to thank everyone for this panel, and we'll pass it on.
Diane, what are we going to see this year?
I think we're going to see this year. I was going to hang out. We're going to see this.
Yeah.
One of the most important things that I feel like President Trump is showing people is his work ethic. And a lot of that is missing from our younger generation. And so I think, you know, that role modeling, I think, I look forward to seeing more of that. I want to just impart on everybody that we are in this for the long haul, and that we can't get stuck on battles. We're going to lose battles, but we have to focus that, I feel like I'm doing this for the future generation. So we can't get stuck. We can't get mired on those little battles that we may lose, right? As long as we learn something from them, I think, we're better off for the future. So I try to remind people, when people send me emails or they call me. The other thing is, I try to encourage people, don't fight with these people. Don't fight. It's time out of your life that you will never get back, right? If they already are dead set against Trump or against what you believe in, why waste your time? You're not going to convince them. You're better off educating yourself around the issues, around what's going on. Start looking. At some point, I'm going to put something out on the internet about OCPF, where you can learn. That's the Office of Campaign and Political Finance, where you can see where donors and who the donors are who are donating to these people, right? So I'm going to put that. So I just want to remind you, just don't fight. Educate yourself. You can find me at 3 places. Diana Ploss, which is my public page, Diana with 2 N's, Ploss with 2 S's. You can find me at MA4Trump and at Boston MA. So at Boston MA. I do have some
websites or Facebook.
Those are all Facebook. So it's like you is understood, I guess I thought. Yeah. So right now it's Facebook. I also have some flyers about the Christmas party if people want to go. So thank you for having me.
Before we go on, I do want to mention, you mentioned something that I am ashamed to think of that did not come up before, is the example of the work ethic of this president. No, I've not heard anybody. I haven't thought about talking about it.
I went to Catholic school.
I went to Catholic school and I didn't think about it. I'm ashamed now. I'll have to do an extra rosary today off of that. Okay, Chip, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm going to just mention 3 separate things. One is the Trump administration with the tax cut, reform bill, the fact that the stock market is booming, it shows no signs of slowing down, is going to carry us into November, and we'll do very well. Second point, and this is on a state level, Citizens for Limited Taxation, we're facing the biggest threat to our taxes in years, and that is the graduated income tax. That is the tax where the more you make, the higher the rate goes. It's going to be on the ballot this November unless it loses in the courts on February 3rd. But we're going to fight it because what the proponents are saying is, well, the 4% tax on millionaires, they're going to, instead of paying 5%, they're going to pay 9%. That money is going to go to transportation and education. Absolute lie. Any revenue that comes to the state goes into the general fund, and then they appropriate it. Number 2, if they win this, God forbid, and they get millionaires, the next group will be the people that get $500,000, then $100,000, then $50,000. When this was on the ballot in '94, the higher rate started at $50,200. So I need your help on that. We've got to battle these people, and there's about 25 special interest groups lining up to support it. So let's defeat it. And one way is to I put out a donor card and a business supply envelope for everybody. Please donate to CLT. Basic membership is $30, but if you want to be a lucrative sponsor of Fat Cat, we would love to have you join. But join CLT. We really need you. We operate on a shoestring, and we need your help. So please send a donation if you can with the material.
And I want to bring up something that you mentioned earlier. You talked about how Connecticut is a basket case. This is exactly what Connecticut did. They passed surtaxes on millionaires, and they left. And suddenly, that money that was part of their budget wasn't there anymore.
New Jersey and Maryland had similar situations.
So that's something that you want to keep away. If you tax people who are mobile, they'll move to where they're not paying that tax. Mike, the floor is yours to finish up.
Okay, well, I'll keep it brief. Thank you to Peter, and thank you for everyone for coming. As far as the next year, I would say just, if you want to know what's happening, just watch how angry the left gets. Because the more Trump succeeds, the angrier the left will get. So, just watch them and you'll be able to gauge where we're going. I think that if the economy continues to be strong and unemployment stays low and job creation stays high and national security continues to be on the positive trend that it is now, I think that there won't be a blue wave in November and Trump will get reelected. And I'll just say, if you think that the left went crazy the day after the 2016 election, wait until the day after the 2020 election.
Can people find you and your writing again?
You can find me at legalinsurrection.com and AmericanLookout.com. Thank you very much.
All right. Now, I'm going to hand the microphone over to the president of the Worcester Tea Party, Madam Brian, before I give my own final spiel. Or shall I give you first, and do you want the microphone?
You give us first.
Yeah, all right. For those, I want to thank you all again for coming. I hope you enjoyed the meal, and I'd be surprised if you didn't. We're hoping to do this again. Of course, the more people we can get in here, the bigger the events we can have. If you have suggestions for the event or suggestions for anything, please let me know. You can find me several places. You can find me at thetechguyblog.com. That's DATECHGUIblog.com. You can find me at TechGuyBlog on Twitter, the Tech Guy Blog on Gab. You can find my interviews, and I'm going to conduct a few of them here on YouTube at the Tech Guy Blog channel on YouTube. And you can also find me under my own name on Catholic Radio, WQPH 89.3 FM, every Saturday at noon. The show is obviously taped since I was here at noon. A show called Your Prayer Intentions. And if you're interested, and even if you're not, I have copies of my book, Hail Mary, the Perfect Protestant and Catholic Prayer, here for sale for $7. So I hope you check out both my religious and my secular writing. I have 14 writers who write for me, who are, quote, my Magnificent Seven doubled. All of that is paid for by readers who decide to kick in. My writers are paid because people like to kick in to support the site. So again, I want to thank you for being here. I want to give a big thank you to Nick Rock, for Mater and the Worcester Tea Party, who did all the technical stuff, allows the streaming and such. I'm just here bloviating. So a great thank you to all of them. I want to finish by handing the microphone to Matt O'Brien, the president of the Worcester Tea Party, has been our partner in this, and as I said, has done yeoman's work.
Thank you, everyone. So, as has been teased in every single invite that went out, I have some rather interesting and surprising news, which we didn't have until a few days ago. One of the main threats that we have to ourselves is this new secular religion of environmentalism. It is transcendent. It is something that is used in every aspect of their program. Whether it's social justice based on race, there's an environmental component. Whether it's advocating schools, they are trying to mold young minds using environmentalism. Whether it's international policy based that we need to help other people, it's all based on human-caused global warming. Part of the reason why America is successful is because we've wrecked the environment on the whole planet, and we've reaped those profits. This isn't true, of course, and I don't think anybody in this room would even conscience such an idea. One of the largest, one of the greatest advocates fighting against this horrid cause is Lord Montaigne from England, and he will be coming to speak in August, and we have the singular honor.
Would that be Christopher
Monkton? Yeah.
Sorry.
We have the singular honor of being able to host him. We have not worked out all the details. You are learning the first people to be warmly invited. This will probably be a much bigger event than we usually have. It will, of course, not be able to be our traditional free education, but it will be an event in August, very similar to that we had Charles Murray come and speak to us in Harvard. We're going to see if we can do this at one of the colleges, perhaps in Worcester or somewhere else in our great Commonwealth. I sincerely hope to see all of you there, and I sincerely hope that every single person in this room